The following is brought to you by the PLD Projects Network. It's me, it's PLD. PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
So I'm just going to say it right now. There's fake numbers. There's fake numbers on the screen. Because you were like, hey, we're going to try something different. We're going to go to a new place. And I like numbers. I like seeing the numbers come down, and I get all excited because we're recording. That was not the real numbers, my friend. It felt weird.
I'm trying to make this feel like home.
Why is it still going?
Because I switched to new numbers. I thought you might want to do different numbers. I tried different numbers out on you.
None of this matters to the people at home, by the way.
People at home, what this means, we went from Riverside and I went to StreamYard just because of whatever reasons. And I tried to recreate the Riverside numbers that we always see when we start hitting record to get excited about. It's not going to happen, but I did try my best. So fuck you, I tried my best.
Look, you tried your best, but your best just wasn't enough tonight. That's all I'm saying. How dare you?
Story of my life, basically. Story of my life.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. Well, it's a big day here. Go ahead.
It's a huge day here. It's like colossally the thing that has been our great white whale in like the search of doing a podcast. We always knew that this was like the day. This was the day that we wanted to get to. And we're doing this so early on. I'm going to be honest, because I'm hoping we do this for a long time. So it's very funny that we're doing this so early on. But I am happy to report that we're going to be talking about the currently 12, almost 13 film franchise Halloween, which began in 1978 under the direction of John Carpenter. So, of course, that means today we're talking about 1978's Halloween. You know, The Night He Came Home, one of the greatest horror films of all time, a personal favorite film of mine, a movie that is in my movies you need to see before you die. And really, if you haven't, Michael's probably going to kill you, and that sucks, and you should be prepared for that. Like, this is why you need to watch this movie. You don't want to be hunted.
Of course, it was almost called the Babysitter Murders. That would be such a disgrace. Like, imagine that. Imagine this alternate universe somewhere where we're not covering the Halloween franchise. We're covering the Babysitter Murders franchise.
You mean the singular film? Because I don't know if there would have been a franchise after that. I'm going to be honest with you.
The name is that important. Actually, it's true. The name is that.
I legitimately find the name that important because it's so simple. The Babysitter Murders does not sound nearly as intriguing as Halloween. The Night He Came Home is the tagline. Like, to me, that's evocative, which is this whole movie. But I'm really excited to talk about it because I really adore this franchise. I really adore this movie in particular. I mean, I really love a lot of them. I'm going to be really insufferable through most of this, actually. I apologized well in advance on Twitter that, guys, I'm sorry. You know what, man? Look, I'm not always an insufferable asshole when it comes to stuff I love. I'm going to be an insufferable asshole about this. I'm going to be honest with you. Because I love it so much.
I will be joining you in being said insufferable asshole as well. You mentioned it right away. I just want to touch base on what you just said about this is the white whale. This is something when we discussed having a podcast, we said this is like basically the basis. Like, we want to cover the Halloween franchise. We didn't want to do it first. We kind of wanted to get our feet wet, see how this was going to go and build up. We said, but you know what? Halloween Ends comes out this year. We should get our feet wet with some things, and then starting the summertime and while leaving a few weeks in case of scheduling snafus, by the time we get to the end of our 12-movie run, it'll be just enough time so we'll be able to go see a movie in the theaters and then come back and have an episode on an actual current episode, as you were, of Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film and being Halloween Ends. So in order to get there, we have this whole franchise to get through, and while it has ups and downs, There's movies I love in this franchise. There's movies that are terrible in this franchise, but yet I will never skip any of them, and I'll watch them all because I just love the universe. I feel like it's like a family like thing. It's like everybody like who likes Halloween is like a big family, and some of us are more closer connected than others. But this film has started it all, and you know how impressive this film is. I will say one thing real quick before you jump off. One thing about this, you can tell how important this film is to us because we haven't had any outside banter at all. We went right for the throat.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I will derail us eventually, I'm sure, but I got way too excited to talk about it because I adore these so much. And you're right. It is kind of like your weird family. And every once in a while you have to let your drunk uncle in because Rob Zombie decided that he was going to do what he was going to do. And like, I don't necessarily like you, drunk uncle, but like, I have to appreciate your existence, I suppose. Spoiler alert, I have feelings about the Rob Zombie Halloween movies.
I can't wait to get there, I'll be honest with you, because we definitely, that's one of the few times we've had differing opinions about things. And they're not as different as like you would think, perhaps, but we definitely have some differing views on it. And I can't wait to get there and talk about that.
One of the things I'm most excited about, though, about this watch-through franchise series is that this is going to be the first time we're also going to have guests along the way. Which I'm super excited about.
Literally signed to deliver before we started recording this.
Yeah. Brandon Hanna will be one of our first guests ever. I think he's going to probably be on a couple of episodes, which I'm very excited about. Who knows if we get other people along the way, but they're going to get to join the chaos that is us doing two mediocre white dudes on film. And I think these episodes, yeah, but I mean, here's the thing is these episodes are already long. We're about to throw another person into the mix. Like, buckle up. You can only imagine how ridiculous it's going to be.
It is going to be absolutely ridiculous.
And the funny thing is for me, it wasn't even like in prep for this or anything, but over the last couple of weeks, I started like going back down a John Carpenter rabbit hole. As you're aware, like over the last couple of weeks, I just started rewatching a bunch of his movies, and in no particular order. I've just been putting them on and like going back and watching them. And last night I actually got to see Big Trouble in Little China on the big screen for the first time, which was like an incredible joy, dude. And it was a sold out crowd. Like it was a sold out crowd at a 10 p.m. screening at our indie theater watching Big Trouble in Little China. And everyone wanted to be there. Like a dad brought his kids with him who had clearly never seen the movie. And they like it. It was the best. Everyone was just like so into it and clapping and having like the best time. I loved it. I loved everything about it because I adore that movie.
Oh, I'm so jealous of you. I've only saw that movie. The funny thing is, I saw that movie recently. I did a Carpenter watch through as well, and I hadn't watched Big Trouble in Little China probably, honestly, since not too long after it came out. I went a long time without watching it.
Dear God, how is that possible?
I know. It just said I kind of went away from Carpenter for a bit. Nothing against him. No reason why. I just, for whatever reason, just outside the Halloween of it all, I didn't really rewatch a lot of his stuff until like the late, probably aughts. Really, when I went back into it, 2010s. I slowly started getting into it. But it wasn't until I sat down with the actual Carpenter watch through again that I finally was like rewatching Big Trouble. I was like, oh, why did I wait so long?
Dude, I'll say this right now. Like, it shouldn't come as any shock with the stuff that I like. Carpenter is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Like, all of his stuff just rings so true. And the thing I love about Big Trouble is somewhere along the way, he's like, I'm going to make a martial arts film, and I'm going to put Kurt Russell in the middle of it, but he's going to be a total idiot. Like, he's not the hero, and everyone else around him is. And then on top of that, he's like, it's also going to have horror elements, but it's also going to be like super sci-fi fantasy. And right. It's like, it's so bonkers, and I adore it so much. And there's like weird creature designs, but Russell is so good as Jack Burton. And I was actually thinking about this while I was walking out. They kept threatening to make like that reboot sequel thing with Dwayne Johnson for like the longest time. And I just don't have any interest. I'm going to be honest. I love The Rock, but I don't want anyone trying to be Jack Burton other than Kurt Russell. I don't want anyone trying to recapture that magic, because the truth of the matter is no one else is John Carpenter.
That's exactly the reason why. Let me say, I really think the issue with it is, by the way, I was never a big Carpenter fan until my recent Carpenter watch through. Which now, again, not that I didn't like him, I just never really glommed onto him as like why I liked him. I liked all his movies, but I always saw them so separately and didn't know who he was when I was younger. I became a movie guy, like really a movie guy in the 2000s. So watching him, like, oh, this is Carpenter, of course, and I love it. Now I love Carpenter, one of my favorites of all time. Now, also, I think the thing about Carpenter is if you look back and you look at all the stories, they're not like huge hits because of the stories per se. Like it's not like these are all like so well written masterpieces, such in depth stuff. It's
they're very scrappy.
They're scrappy. They're very dirty. They're very like not like so like taking Carpenter out of it. And taking everything that like those are kind of pieces that like they just don't make sense unless it's someone. Nobody else doing this and makes sense except for John Carpenter. If anybody else but John Carpenter made this film, it would have been a disastrous, stupid, and never seen the light of day. And if it did see the light of day, it would have gone by them the next day.
And that's I think you kind of nailed it, and we'll get into it as we talk about the Halloween films too, because there's a real truth to that, and there's a reason that I think that all the movies that are the strongest in the franchise are the ones that he was somehow involved in a capacity. Like, not to show our hand or anything, but when you look at like the 2018 reboot, when you look at Kills, he still produces them. All the story stuff went through him first. Like they always passed through what they were going to do. H2O, very similarly, he was very far along in going to almost direct it.
Yeah.
So I mean, 2 and 3, the ones where he's the most directly involved are really some of the strongest entries, and that's not lost on me. That doesn't change the fact that I love a lot of these regardless. But like, him being involved means that the franchise, for the most part, kind of stays the Carpenter course. There's not a lot of trying to redo the mold or break the mold. There are, but that's when he's not involved.
Let me ask you a question, and this might be more served better to ask later on during our H2O episode, but so we'll get into it more during that episode. But just off the cuff here, would you want to see Carpenter direct H2O?
I mean, yes and no. I like Steve Miner. Obviously, Steve Miner did some of the Friday the 13th films. He did 2 and 3. He's had a track record around the slasher genre. I thought it was pretty cool that he actually got a chance to play with Michael in the same way that he got to play with Jason, because for all intents and purposes, he kind of defines Jason as far as the Friday franchise is concerned, because he does 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And guess what? Those are the ones where Jason becomes Jason, because
if you haven't
Jason's
watched
not the killer.
If you watch Friday the 13th Part 1 or Scream for that matter, you'll know that Mrs. Voorhees was the killer in Friday the 13th Part 1. And Jason really is only a mutant deformed child who jumps out of the ocean or the lake at the end. So, right.
Correct.
Steve Miner is the guy who basically, for all intents and purposes, created Jason.
Right. So for him to play with another horror icon, which, as we all know, is like Friday was kind of made to rip off Halloween. That was the entire reason it was made by the studio, was to try to find that trend and ride it out still 2 years later.
Can I say also how refreshing that is, by the way, that like the creators of Sean Cunningham are basically just, they'll completely admit it. It's not going to try to deny it. It's like, yep, saw Halloween, want to make money, decided to rip it off. Like that.
Yeah, 100%. God, what a nice, actual honest answer.
I think why we appreciate it so much that we can approve it. Go, oh, yeah, it is a ripoff, but we know it's a ripoff. Everyone knows it's a ripoff. No one's trying to pretend any differently.
And ultimately, that franchise goes a very different direction as well. So, like, even if it started that way, they're very different regardless. And we'll get into some of the why of it, because I have very strong feelings about this movie in particular and the way that it's crafted. But I don't think I think ultimately I liked Miner doing it, but I think had Carpenter done it, it probably would have been more cohesive, to be honest, because I think I don't want to get into the H2O of it all just yet, because that's so far down the line.
Right.
but I definitely think that had Carpenter been more actively involved in the end and directed it, I think that the movie shifts and changes a little bit to a third act way in particular.
Okay, I get that.
And I'll say this. I don't think we're that wrong, because if you look at 2018, a lot of H2O's major beats are replicated in 2018 while Carpenter is producing it. So it's not lost on me that a lot of the stuff that H2O did was used later to try to, because they knew. The truth is that H2O did a lot of the same things just 20 years earlier. And that's not a bad thing either. I'm not like taking shots at 2018. There's a reason to retread a lot of that stuff, and doing it through a different lens.
That's a great answer. I'm not going to go into it either too much because of that. I will say I'm actually overall glad that Carpenter didn't direct it, because the Carpenter from the 90s, while still fun and entertaining, wasn't the Carpenter from 78. So I don't know if it kind of felt like that's a difference between Escape from New York and Escape from LA. Both are great films, but Escape from New York to me is a superior film in almost every way.
Yes. I mean, it's not even close for me. And I enjoy LA, but
I kind of feel it'd be the same way. I kind of feel like I would have really enjoyed the Carpenter H2O, but it would have paled in comparison. I think Steve Miner gave it a little something different, which I was able to glob onto. So I'm happy that it happened the way it did, regardless. One more question I want to ask before we get into this whole thing. And I'm sorry, Richard, Eric Trevey, our biggest fan of our banters. We're not finding ways to go, I actually just want to get right to it because we love Halloween so much. How did you get into Halloween at all in the first place? What was your first Halloween movie? How did you introduce yourself to it? I'll get all into that.
So what's funny about that is actually, I think that the first Halloween movie I ever saw, and at the time I didn't realize it, to be honest, was Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers.
Really?
So I'm always going to have a soft spot for it, because back in the day when cable was still very new, and a lot of these movie channels and a lot of these movie packages that were put together on like Stars and Cinemax and all of that, they were just buying libraries, right? And the Halloween movies under Dimension were different than the Halloween movies owned by Lionsgate and Universal, because Universal owned 2 and 3 and Lionsgate owned 1 and maybe Anchor Bay at that time too. But like, no one owned all of the movies in one place, but Dimension had a hold on 4, 5, and 6 and 7 and 8. But before 8 and 7 had come out, the others played pretty regularly on Cinemax, and I would just kind of put it on and just watch. And I was pretty young, and my parents had no idea I was watching it. And then, like, as that went on, I started to realize that I was clearly missing something. Like, there's more story here, and I need to figure out the why of it all. And like, that's when I started to deep dive more into, okay, so there's got to be more of these movies. And I'll never forget when H2O was coming out, because H2O's marketing campaign has been very lasting with me. I remember it was the first time I really realized that like horror movies kind of exist and like they're bigger than life. And that marketing push was everywhere. I saw that trailer in front of so many movies that my parents would take me to, because my parents just took me to movies I probably shouldn't have been watching. And so I always remember that shot of Michael where he's like holding on to the one rafter and like lowering down. And that was a big trailer shot. And I always remember the H2O of it all. And so because of that, I started looking into it more, much to my parents' frustration. And it's when I really started going into every video store I could to get a hold of the movies or whatever else. And so I just kind of kept watching it. And then when I want to say that Zombies Halloween movies were some of the first ones that I ever kind of followed production for. where I started to really get into like the news cycles and paying attention to productions. And like, we have to remember in the early days of movie news and stuff, we didn't pay attention to a lot of it. Like we had Starlog magazine or like, you know, Empire or Wizards of, you know, all these different magazines that were covering movies, but it was always once the movie was like way farther down the line and like much closer to release. So a lot of the time you didn't know a movie was being made necessarily in the same way that nowadays we know about it like from jump,
right?
Because it's constantly talked about, it's constantly brought up, and et cetera, et cetera. So I remember following Halloween super closely, and it was one of the first times that I was so curious because, you know, I loved House of a Thousand Corpses, and I loved The Devil's Rejects. So the idea of him doing Halloween was very fascinating to me. Now, granted, I have my own feelings about how those movies turned out, but I do think that that was a turning point for me. And this franchise is a part of that because I was so enamored and so focused on what was being made, what they were doing with it, following the production. Like, it changed me. And it became part of why I fell in love with this space and doing this type of stuff, because then I could really hone in and like focus on them more.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So Halloween is very built into that.
Okay.
Like there's other movies, obviously the Hobbit movies are a part of that too, because, you know, not long after Lord of the Rings, the same thing, we started to hear rumblings, but that's when I started following that more and more, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So Halloween is very integral to me being who I am and where we are now. And obviously the first movie, once I finally saw it, I saw the first one late at night one night. I had rented it. I was watching it at my house downstairs. My parents were in bed. I was watching it on an old VHS. Had the front door of our house open. We had a screen. And it was just me, one of my pugs, and the movie. And it was one of the most terrifying experiences I ever had, in a good way, because it felt so real. You know, it was unnerving. I live in suburban America. The movie is all about living in the middle of suburban America and what can happen. Like, and we'll kind of get into this. I think that's what makes the movie so special, is it feels like anywhere USA.
Yeah.
This was one of the first times I remember, not that this didn't happen beforehand, but it was one of the first times I remember a horror film feeling so visceral, because it was the first time it was like, you're not having to leave. That's right. The thing about a lot of horror movies. If you look at Psycho, or you look at The Hills Have Eyes, or Friday the 13th, or most of these bigger franchises, horror does not come to you. You have ventured out into the unknown, and now you are caught in the middle of something, right? Tourist trap. Like, you're not in a place that should be comforting, and you're not in a place that should always feel safe, and that's home. Halloween ponders the question, what if horror came home and now you're caught in the middle of it? Like, you did not choose to leave. You stayed home, and horror showed up on your doorstep. It's a very, very interesting concept. And I always remember that feeling so scary, because it felt so real that I could look out my front door and, you know, we had these like street lamps and stuff. And like, what if I saw a figure just like hanging out under a street lamp? It didn't matter who it was or if I knew the person, but suddenly I'm very unnerved. Yeah. So it had a very lasting effect on me. Long story short, Halloween matters, and especially to me. So sorry,
that's all right.
It's my very long answer.
That's what we're here for. I will say, interesting enough, that's what actually brought me to the Nightmare franchise as well, because Nightmare took that step further and said nightmares can come to you wherever you are, no matter where you are.
Right.
But yeah, let me answer my own question, because I think it's important to tell where we were and how we are approaching this franchise in a way. Where how we came to it, I think, matters to how we see it. And I can tell you that I have a little bit of a mystery in my head, because I saw these when I was young. I was definitely like 10, 11, or 12 when I started. Now, given my advanced age compared to you,
I mean, look, I don't want to say you're old, but
old.
the cake is a lie, and you don't understand that reference. So
I barely do. Only because I have kids that have told me about it. Either way, though, I could be wrong. I don't know this, and I'm completely lying to you, but I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure the Halloween 4 was the first movie I saw.
I mean, that tracks for where you would have been age-wise.
1988, about 10 or 11. I've been just turning 11 that year.
And it was a big deal, at the time.
Because it was bringing Michael Myers back after Halloween 3 happened. Obviously, that was a big
return of Michael Myers.
It is actually legitimately in the name. They actually had to put Michael Myers in the name to go, last night, we know you didn't like the fact that Michael Myers wasn't in 3, which we're going to get into that whole. That's another discussion I can't wait to have. It's a very interesting take. Halloween 3, it's very, very different. But it did bring Michael Myers back. And I was like, okay. So I had no idea who this was. I just knew I was kind of starting to get into horror a little bit. I don't remember which I saw first in terms of Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, or Jason. I don't remember, but I was definitely getting into it around the same time. We all had movies out in that time.
Yeah. And I have to think, I think Michael was the first one that I watched, but I always knew of all three of them in a pretty large capacity.
Yeah.
Because for me, being born in 90, by the time I'm born, the first 8 Friday movies are all out.
Yeah.
The major thrust of the Friday or the Nightmare franchise is also over. Like New Nightmare is basically kind of the only one left. And but Halloween is still going. And that's like Halloween is still, again, H2O had a huge impact on me just from its marketing because it's 97 and I was 7 years old, or 98 rather, but the marketing from like 97 on. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to say if I had the gun to my head, I had to make a call. I think I probably saw Freddy first. I think I saw Nightmare 3 before I saw anything else, potentially. But either way, Nightmare 4 is the one that I globbed onto. And quite frankly, it might be why it's very, very high in my ratings, because there's nothing like nostalgia to boost your boost how you look.
No, Halloween 4 is great. It's not just nostalgia. It's not just nostalgia. It's actually great.
I mean, I agree. I think that definitely doesn't hurt. That's one. So I went back and watched the other ones after that, and I watched Halloween 1. And it was interesting to see because it's definitely a different Michael at that point. But Halloween 1 was very quickly my second favorite at that point. Not anymore. Halloween. I'm going to say, I'll spoil this right now. Halloween, the original Halloween, is my favorite of the franchise now by far.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's literally a spoiler. The spoiler to see where does all the other ones rank.
I think anyone would be shocked if we didn't feel that way, other than maybe having Halloween 3 above it, because there are those people who feel that way. I do not, and that's not a dig at Halloween 3. It's just the original is Halloween.
That's Halloween 3 is the most polarizing of the entire saga, quite frankly. You could say Rob Zombies are polarizing, which I get also, and some people say H2O is polarizing. Some people are going to say Halloween Kills is polarizing. But Halloween 3, because of the lack of Michael Myers, is a totally different ballpark in a way. So actually, I have different views. I have differing views of it in my own heart about, like, just without taking a look at it as a Halloween movie versus a scary movie or a creepy movie or whatever. But we'll get into that again when we get to Halloween 3. But that's where I came from, was Halloween 4 first and Halloween. And then I went through there. I loved it. And then I loved all about it. But that point when I got into it, I don't really remember Halloween 5 coming out very much, to be honest with you. But Halloween 6 came out. I was doing a deep dive into horror movies at that point. I was in college at that point. So I saw Halloween 6 in theaters as well. And by the way, a little bit tangent, we're going to have to decide whether we want to cover Halloween 6 in like one episode or if we want to do 2 episodes. One of like the normal cut or the producer's cut.
I think that it's actually better to probably do it as one and do a compare. Yeah, because I mean, not to air this the way we are, like doing this on air, but I think it makes the most sense probably to actually have watched both and kind of sit down with both and go. Yeah. Or rather, we could watch through the first 8, then go back to the producer's cut, and then continue from there. Mm-hmm. Because, it's a bridge between the rest.
Potentially. We'll have to definitely get into it.
Yeah.
But Halloween 6 at one point definitely felt like a franchise killer at the time. But then, like when Halloween H2O came out, not too long actually afterwards, and in the grand scheme of things, it really brought it back in my mind. That's where I was. I did not. Resurrection just kind of came and went. The zombie movies.
I want to say Resurrection might have been the first one I properly owned. Actually, I bought it on DVD at Hollywood Video used.
Okay, I guess I could see doing that. Honestly speaking, the same thing. Like, oh, what the hell? If I'm gonna own them all, I might as well just start with any of this. If it's cheap, I'll get it, kind of thing.
I think that was pretty much it, because that came out in 2002?
2002.
So I was 12, so I was still pretty young, and I've never really hidden it here. I've talked about it. Like, my parents would take me to movies and stuff, but my parents were also they're very protective, because they were, right. Christian conservatives who, they worry about the stuff that you're intaking as a thing. They've gotten much better, obviously. And I turned out not to be like that at all, which means that I was raised well enough to know good, bad, whatever, and caring about human rights or whatever the situation is. Like, but I was always grateful that at the end of the day, when it came to stuff like that they didn't have to love it, but they always let me watch it and
right.
buy them and have them in the house, because there's nothing worse than saying you can't watch this thing or you can't do this thing, because it just makes you want to do it more.
Right. And actually makes it worse, definitely, in every which way.
Right.
You want to watch it more. Also, you start you think of it as a bigger deal than it is. Like, you start getting into
right.
it. Where to be watching, kind of oh, cool, whatever.
So they definitely did that, and it was one of the first DVDs I ever owned. And it was the first one of the franchise I definitely owned.
Okay, that makes sense. The zombie movies kind of came and went for me, and I saw them. They were great. But then Halloween Peak came back 2018. I got just as hyped as I've always ever been. So I think it kind of sparked my interest back in the Halloween franchise, which was never dead. But that they definitely had periods of dormancies when it was it's kind of how I feel about Nightmare now. I love Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's been so long since I've heard anything. It's kind of like, okay, I'll get excited again when a new reboot comes out or something like that. We'll figure that out then. But anyway, that's where I came to the franchise from, and I was very excited to get into it. So now here we are, going back to the beginning, as you were, of Babysitter Murders. Sorry, the
yeah, I can't tell you how much we dodged a bullet with that. I feel like I said, there's something about the title of Halloween that's so simple, and so, again, you call it Halloween. You have I just want to talk about this poster. I want to talk about how simple it is, because it's a jack-o'-lantern and then a hand holding the knife next to it, and it's just the night he came home as the tagline. How evocative! How absolutely already in. And I remember that VHS cover. I remember owning the DVDs with that. Now, granted, over the years they've changed that, and that's not what the Blu-ray and the 4Ks look like now. But you could still find them, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah,
the originals, but it was always so simple. So the Babysitter Murders was a absolute travesty waiting to happen title wise, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean it's too wordy. Halloween feels so
boom in and out
simple, yeah, and it works. And it's oh god, a killer came home on Halloween night. The poster sells that,
right? 100%. I agree with you all on that. It actually reminded me just not only the poster, but the title sequence, the opening title sequence, same thing. Very simple, didn't have to do a whole lot to it, but it was kind of so iconic that they still tried to they tried to do it all the way throughout. It never quite felt the same or felt as good as
they've definitely tried, though. And here's one thing we didn't really talk about this, and one of the reasons I'm very excited about this before we really jump into this one, I want to take a moment to shout out the fact that part of the reason we're doing this is, and why I'm so excited to, is that there's no franchise that is as choose your own adventure as the Halloween franchise has become over time.
You're not wrong.
Halloween has the most complicated and ridiculous convoluted timeline that I've ever seen any franchise have in my life. And that's what I'm so here's how we're going to lay it out. I'm going to try to break it down into the separate timelines as we go. But everything stems from Halloween. Every timeline basically stems from this original film, outside of Halloween 3, which is out in its own like thing, because Halloween is a movie within Halloween 3.
Yeah.
So Halloween 3 is just out in this. Yeah, like take it out. It's in its own orbit, doing its own thing. So Halloween is the beginning.
Unless, real quick, I'll just say unless you in the universe, Halloween, the movie, was more of a biographical tale of the actual incidents that happened on Halloween 1978. And now what we're seeing, so Jamie Lee Curtis is starring as Laurie Strode. As Laurie Strode, a real life person.
I'd never thought about that, and now I'm like, actually, I would love that.
So it's still in the franchise that way. This is just somebody else.
Yeah. I never thought about that. That's fascinating, actually.
But we have no confirmation on that. But if we want to jam it in there, that's how we're going to jam it in there.
All right, I'm here for it. Okay, so you go from there's two very distinct Laurie Strode timelines.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is a Dr. Loomis timeline, and then there's the Rob Zombie timelines. Now, that's the fascinating part, is that you can go down any one of these rabbit holes, and it gives you very different outcomes, no matter how you do it.
Okay.
The fun thing is that from there, the two distinct Laurie timelines are Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween H2O, and Halloween Resurrection.
Yes.
Then there's the Laurie Strode timeline of Halloween, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends.
Correct.
We are currently in the second timeline with Laurie Strode. The reason I say that is, spoiler alert, Laurie is murdered in Resurrection.
Right.
The new timeline pretends that nothing after Halloween happened. So we're in a new timeline.
So that actually means, in our little rant that we always bring up, Halloween 2018 is misnamed in so many different ways. Because not only is it Halloween,
I fucking hate the title so much.
They're doing they're doing the whole fucking lazy thing where I'm just going to name this movie after the first one. I think it is. But not only that, it is more egregious here than any other one, because not only is it it's a sequel still, it's not a remake. So it's not even, it should be Halloween 2, 2018.
Or Halloween Returns. It was right there.
No, I mean, but if you wanted to use the number thing, if you wanted to be
sure, if you
numbers,
wanted to,
it's actually Halloween 2. It's a remake of Halloween 2, not anything else. I get it.
But then we have 3 Halloween 2s on our hands. It would have just been simpler to call it Halloween Returns. I don't understand it. I don't understand the title thing. I'm not gonna. It's fucking nonsense. All right, there's another timeline, and that is the Loomis timeline. That is Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 4, 5, and 6.
So that's the Okay, that's what you're calling the Loomis timeline. Okay, that's what I'm sure. Okay, I'm not sure you got that.
Because everything from there stems from what happened, but you're following him more than you're following anyone else. Now, there are people out there who have said that actually there's a way to tie the original Laurie timeline with the original Loomis timeline, because the Loomis timeline eventually kills Laurie off screen.
Yeah,
in the car accident.
Which the interesting part is, by the way, I don't know if we talked about this or not. Maybe you're going to get there, and I'm just jumping the gun. The fact is that H2O almost included that.
Right, and that's what I was getting to.
Okay,
is that there's a no, you're fine. There is a world where people say that her being in witness protection when H2O starts is the fact that's why she's been dead, quote unquote, the whole time. But at the same time, I don't think it quite lines up, because it could, but you have to deal with all the Cult of Thorns stuff, and
right.
H2O 100% goes every opposite direction of wanting to deal with the Cult of Thorns stuff.
Well, the quite thing that I don't even know if you know this or not, but it's actually deleted lines. There are lines, and a lot of times take a lot. I'm going to say this now and get this out of the way. Taking Shape is a book written by Dustin McNeil and Travis Mullins, and they also did Taking Shape 2. It's the best thing I've ever read about Halloween. It takes developing Halloween from script to screen, goes through all the Halloweens, like in-depth, detailed interviews. It's so great. And then Taking Shape 2, it goes into the lost sequels, so to speak. It's all the ones that were developed. And there were multitude of shit developed for Halloween that never actually happened. It goes into like 23 of them, let's put it that way. And that's not even all of them. Those are the most significant ones. And that might lead to a Patreon bonus content, which we'll talk about soon. Maybe even later on in this episode. But I believe it was in this book, the first one, Taking Shape, where they actually stated that there was actually some kind of line about the car crash or faking her death in a car crash in order to do witness protection. So this stuff was actually considered put entry into the H2O, but for whatever reason, it was deleted out. So therefore, it becomes much more open to that possibility, which is why you can say it's not a different timeline.
I still assume that part of the reason that they did that was ultimately knowing that they didn't want to get into dealing with the Cult of Thorn, which is a whole thing that eventually you guys will learn. We're going to have to talk about this stuff, but like there's a whole thing about this cult that might have been involved with Michael's existence. These movies get real convoluted real fast.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I adore them, they get real convoluted real quick. And so that's why there are so many timelines, because every time someone wants to do something, they're like, screw it, we're just going to reset it.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so funny that it's happened so many times. Like Halloween 4 was like, we'll pick up where Halloween 2 kind of left off, but we're still going to kind of reset it and like just dump Laurie and move on. And we'll just use Loomis as the,
right, the tying factor to everything else.
Yeah, and so it's just so fun to me. And then, of course, Zombie did his own thing, and Zombies probably likely would have continued too, but he had so many problems with Miramax at the time and the stuff over there that thankfully the second one, they kind of botched it theatrically with the editing, and the theatrical cut of that movie is really, really messy and not very good. And
Zombie off.
Yeah, and enough that he would never have gone back. And he did. I'll say this: Halloween 2 is the better of his two movies.
I actually fully agree with you on that. That's something I came around on during not spoiler, but I actually watched the Halloween franchise. I want to say about a year or two ago. I tend to do this one a lot. I tend to watch through. And that was the first time I watched through, and I actually did love Halloween 2 more than Halloween 1 for that exact reason, because he got to do a lot of his own thing, which is what we'll get into during those episodes. But also interesting, if you went into Taking Shape 2, there actually was development on a third zombie film,
right,
that's what I mean. In the zombie universe, not directed by Zombie. It actually sounded really kind of interesting. I can't wait to get to that at some point too. But yeah, I agree with you. You're saying it's interesting. It's another timeline in itself.
Yeah. So basically, in saying all that, like, it's so funny that such a simple concept of Halloween ends up spawning this bigger than life thing that the franchise has become. But it all starts here in 1978. In maybe the most simplistic version of a film that you can possibly imagine. It's made for not a lot of money, $300,000 at the time, goes on to make $70 million at the box office by the time it's over. Carpenter and Cundy and Deborah Hill are not like known names and quantities just yet. Like, people know them, but they don't know them. You know what I'm saying? Like, Assault on Precinct 13 had happened. Carpenter had done a couple of TV movies, including an Elvis one starring Kurt Russell. Like, he isn't just John Carpenter yet.
Right.
But he decided,
he did get to, actually, he was just well known enough that he was able to forego some of it. He traded off some rights and they were able to get his name over the top.
Correct.
Of the film as John Carpenter's Halloween.
Which I will love forever and always every time the movie starts. But what's so fascinating is that they're getting this movie together. Donald Pleasance is not even the first choice as Sam Loomis.
They wanted Hammer. They wanted Hammer.
Yeah, they wanted Hammer. They wanted, and Peter Cushing. They were the two. They were both the ones they wanted. They both turned them down. Pleasance didn't really want to make the movie. He was notoriously actually very drunk during one of the nights that he had to deliver a monologue, and everyone was super worried that he was not going to be able to deliver the monologue, only for him to like absolutely knock it out of the park. Apparently Carpenter was scared of Pleasance, like in he is such a like bigger than life personality, and he's just a very like stern type of dude, and he didn't really know how to work with him at first,
right?
Which I find fascinating.
Yeah, me as well. Me also, man.
And then, of course, what happens? Pleasance fucking stays with this series for another 20 years, basically. Well, 15, but like he stays with it all the way through. Yeah.
If he hadn't passed, I guarantee you he would have been there in H2O. He would have done it. He would have done it because he ended up loving the character itself. I think he just like got into it enough. He's like, yeah, I'll do it.
And he helped write parts of the
dialogue.
script with the dialogue, and it works. And I'll say this. The thing I'm most excited about to talk about as we go along is how much more manic and insane his performances get as the movies go. But he is always such a highlight in these movies. I love him in this one, but specifically thinking about like the farther along we get, the more just outlandish the performances become. He's just totally untethered and unhindered.
I find it actually amazing because he was such a linchpin for me as well that I will say I like H2O a lot. But I'm definitely missing the Loomis of it. Resurrection, nothing. I mean, the zombie had their own version, which is fine. But that's a different tale entirely. Different character, actually. They call him Loomis, but he's definitely different. Not the same Sam Loomis.
Oh, not even close to the same.
But I love what Halloween 2018, and more specifically Halloween Kills does. We actually got to get Sam Loomis back in a mostly real way. It felt real, felt legitimate. Honoring Pleasance in a way, like the best way we could have gotten in a way, and it made it feel like a Halloween movie even more than Michael. I think almost the way Donald Pleasant feelings it feel like more like a Halloween movie than Michael Myers himself does. To be honest with you, I'm not gonna lie.
They've become a little bit of a duo for me. Like they kind of go hand in hand, and that's
right.
What I've always liked is that. Basically, Loomis's entire I've been calling him Loomis this whole time. Loomis's whole thing is it's that you can say it kind of either way, to be honest.
That's fine. You can say however you want to say. I know you're talking about. That's the important thing.
Yeah. But Loomis's whole thing is like just the circling of insanity of one person so bent on keeping evil at bay, and his obsession with Michael ends up being his total undoing, and yet I can't get enough of it.
Right.
So, and here's the thing about this movie in particular too. The year this comes out, a lot of the times when it came to horror films, people were having to see them in like seedy grindhouse theaters. Like you didn't get a lot of horror movies in multiplexes. You weren't seeing a lot of these bigger horror films doing that unless it was like Psycho made by Alfred Hitchcock, because it was a Hitchcock film. That was an event, but bigger horror films were not. But suddenly Halloween in 78 is being dropped in the middle of multiplexes across the country. Again, really leading to that feeling of Anytown, USA, and this concept that you don't have to leave your house necessarily or your town necessarily to be scared. Now, this movie that is set in a town that looks like any town that you are walking down in just about anywhere in America has this serial killer in the middle of it who has just escaped on Halloween night. It really added to that idea that this could happen anywhere, and that you could have been babysitter number 6, Paul. You could have been babysitter number 6.
I could have been.
And that's what I love. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot today as we're getting into this. And the thing that I love so much is that Halloween still stands out, still works, and is still terrifying because everything about it feels like it could happen to anyone at any time, anywhere. That is what is the lasting power of this film.
I do have a big point I want to make that's kind of related to it. But also, before I go into this little little rant, have you ever read the novelization of the film?
I actually haven't. It's one of the things that I've always meant to do. I'm sure I could find it and finally sit down with it.
I do want to. I want to sit down with that at some point because I've read some things about it that are very interesting. One of the biggest things about Halloween that people rant and rave on, and it's something I agree with, to be completely honest, even though I'm hypocritical when it comes to zombie movies. We'll get to that too, but they don't get very much into detail about Michael. Michael is named once in the very beginning of the film by his parents. When his father comes home, he actually says Michael. The rest of the time, it's basically him, the evil. He's credited as the shape. I mean, it's basically,
which I love, by the way. I love that.
Love that credit. Right, I do. But that's been some of the biggest approvals of Michael Myers is that people will say that he is not. He is pure evil. He is the boogeyman. There is no rhyme or reason. There's no reason why he became what he was. He's just pure evil. And it's a great thing to let our imagination fill in blanks. It's impressive. I watched The Black Phone so recently for this because I
fucking love Black Phone so
right.
much. Oh my God.
I talked about it last time, and I mentioned exactly one of the reasons I like this so much. We talked about this last week in last week's episode of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's us. It's not shocking.
But it was the fact that we didn't get the background of the grabber. We didn't get the background of the mother who had secret powers as well, or psychic powers as well. Imagination is so much more valuable than people think it is at times. And that's what they let you do for Michael. Michael is a purebred evil character who had no background, no rhyme or reason. There's no reason why. I mean, even Halloween 2, even Carpenter kind of fucks this up a little bit with going into the whole sibling angle. And he agrees. He hates the fact that it was. We're going to get into that when we talk about Halloween 2. But it's amazing how that is and how much that's fucked up throughout the franchise. Not only by Zombie, I actually give Zombie a pass because, again, we'll get there when we get there. We'll talk about it more. But one of the reasons I give it a pass is that if we're going to remake something, that's your job to do whatever you want with it. And if you decide that you're going to go into the background, then go into the background. That was his choice to make. Whether or not it's a good one for the Halloween, that's what we'll debate about, I'm sure. But that I give a pass. But the rest of the Halloweens that are supposed to be in this universe sunk in, they should have picked up on that, and they didn't. But what's interesting about that is from what I've read, the novelization does do that. It does make that mistake and goes into its details, but it actually has served as the basis for some things that have gone on throughout Halloween 2, even Halloween 3, and more, because they talk about the Sam Hain references. Sam Hain's reference in Halloween 2. Sam Hain is a big part of Halloween 3.
A huge part.
Right? And it gives Michael this whole reason to be evil. And I read people love the book for that reason. So I'm kind of interested to see now, given how much I don't like that aspect of things. But it's interesting to see how something that's so universally loved like the movie is, how that feels when I read it. I know it also has to do with the Cult of Thorns, which also took a lot out of the first novelization to a degree. Very interesting takes. I really do want to read it. I think one of these days I will have to find it and read it. But just by
I mean, look, it's one of those that's it's actually, we've used this reference a couple of times to White Whale because it's a very notoriously out of print at this point, and it's very hard to find like a decent copy. But I might just start browsing some used bookstores, see if I can kind of get this and pick it up. But I'll say it's fascinating to me that this franchise is so long now. Like, we're 44 years later, here we are still talking about the original, and it's still going. 44 years later, there is a sequel coming out still to this movie that came out in 1978, and that's pretty remarkable, actually. And it shows the lasting power of Michael as a presence and as a character, of more of a presence than a character, because Michael's really not a character. He's a monster. He's the shape, like you said. Like, he's really only named the one time in this movie. Now, granted, over time we have humanized him in different ways, and he's become known as Michael more and more because there's been more movies. But it's an iconic look. It's an iconic feeling character. He's one of the more interesting slasher characters in a lot of ways, because I think he has a very profound feel that feels different than everyone else around him. It's a very simple design. It's a dude wearing a suit and a mask. Like, it's so funny that it's so iconic, because there's nothing different other than a jumpsuit and a white mask. Right. And yet that image has been seared across our minds for almost 50 years.
Not only just a mask, like, it's a fucking William Shatner mask.
Yeah, right. Now, the mask has evolved for better or worse over time, but
and back
the
and
first
forth,
one's just a Kirk mask.
They just fucked it a little bit. They painted it white and they kind of stretched it out a little bit and everything else. But yeah, that's all it was. That's what's funny. Why it's so iconic. Like this whole movie, like has no idea, and I guess this is to its benefit. It has no idea how iconic it really is. It has no idea, like when they're making it, and that's the best way to be. Because I think a lot of times, all the sequels and sequels in general, sometimes, shall we say, take the original too preciously. In a way, it's like they tread. This is all iconic stuff. We gotta and the truth is, sometimes you make your best work when you just make decisions because they work. Sometimes things work and they work for mistake reasons. You can't recreate lightning in a bottle. So just do your own thing. And I'm not trying to say give you license to go to fuck around with things that were not in one, but there's something to be said about just doing your artist work, going from your gut, going from your soul, and just going on instinct. That's what happened here. So it's funny how we say this also, but we're 55 minutes in. We really haven't started going into the movie yet. So
I know.
Banter aside, banter. It's just all Halloween banter. So
it's Halloween banter because there's a lot to talk about. Again, there's 12 of these movies that are released right now, that with another one on the way. But there's a lot that you have to kind of break down before you can really talk about it. Now, we've touched on it throughout, but you have to kind of lay the groundwork. There's a lot here. And you'll hear us continue to do that as we go along. Because each of these movies comes with its own interesting baggage of sorts in the production or where it was going or what it was doing. And we also have to remember, and we don't talk about this nearly enough, these movies were not meant to be sequelized.
Right.
When Halloween was conceived, Carpenter saw it as an anthology series.
Right.
Which is why when Halloween blew up and they asked him to do a second one, he goes, fine, I'll do it. But this is going to be a one-off sequel, and then we're going to continue from there. But at that point, people liked Michael too much and rejected Halloween 3 outright.
And the interesting thing about that, again, we'll get into it more, is I wonder how it would have been if the marketing hadn't been just non-existence about if they had come forth to the ring going, this is not a Michael Myers movie. This is a anthology movie or whatever. Because a lot of people went, especially today, pre-internet, what we were talking about before, where now we know from the get-go. Back then, we knew nothing until we sat down at the theaters. If we got a title, we're we got a title. We got a poster, But even trailers weren't really a thing. So all of a sudden, people sat down and go, all right, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. What's Michael up to now? And there's no Michael in the movie. People got fucking pissed. They got pissed.
Yeah.
There was no Michael in the movie.
Because it was called Halloween 3, and they had been conditioned at that point that Halloween meant
Michael Myers. Right. And you can't otherwise. That's why they actually legitimately had to make the next movie called The Return of Michael Myers. He's in it. But I agree. It's what they would. And Carpenter definitely took a paycheck for the second one, I think, more than anything else. We'll get into that during Halloween 2 as well. Because he does not, that's not some of his best work, and he knows it. Even though, in retrospect, it's still a passable, likable film. Still fun to watch overall. There's a lot to like, but it doesn't match this one at all.
No. I will eventually rank the franchise too, but I don't have Halloween 2 super high. It's somewhere very middle of the road for me.
We're gonna find out when we rank.
But guess what? We're not talking about Halloween 2 tonight. We're talking about Halloween, 1978's John Carpenter classic. And I'm going to call it a classic, not even just a modern classic. It is a classic for all intents and purposes. And we open on Halloween night of 1963. And Michael Myers, at 6 years old, murders his sister Judith with the kitchen knife in a totally brilliant opening that is done in a first-person perspective, already showing you how intense this movie is going to be in a lot of ways by putting you in the eyes of the killer, watching someone murdered in front of you. It is such a chilling, brilliant way to open the film.
I agree 100%. One interesting thing about that makes it even better. It sometimes, I don't know why, but sometimes when something's a little wonky, it actually, for whatever reason, endears me to the film more. And 80s are a big part of that. And I know it's a 78, the same type of situation. Because if you look at it, you watch the point of view, and you see him like look at the knife. The camera looks at the knife. And that wouldn't happen, right? No. The killer's not going like this and go. That's literally for the audience to see. But like at the same time, it doesn't matter. Like the realism aside, or like about it, or the fact that like he's like you barely really touch her the way it's going, but it still works for the atmosphere of what they're going for, and it makes it an iconic opening for certain. I love that whole bit of it.
Oh, I do too. Also, I just came up with something that I want to pitch to you real quick.
Oh, on-air pitch. Okay.
On-air pitch. Is there a world where we have enough time to throw the fog into the mix of us doing this? Because people look at the fog as Laurie on the run after Halloween 2.
So can we watch The Fog after Halloween 2 before we do Halloween 3 as like a little in-between?
Yeah. Is there a world where we could do that?
We have built in some time in case we had schedule mishaps. I could see us pausing and doing the interquel.
That could be fun, right?
Are we gonna like? We have to like. Are we treating it as if it is a Halloween movie?
Yeah,
that's what we're saying. I think it's gonna confuse a lot of people upon watching, going, "Wait, what?" But you know what?
Yeah. But
let's do it.
That's why I'm pitching this, though, right? Because the idea is, if we're already going, like, we're going to do Halloween 3, right?
Yeah,
it's already the bonkers, non-existent version of the sequel, right?
Yeah.
Why not just?
I'm not going to say definitively yes or no right this second, but I'm leaning yes. So we'll talk about that more as we get there. We still at least we'll figure it out by next week when we do Halloween 2.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. I just think there's something.
Make me see The Fog again. I'm okay with watching The Fog again. So
just a thing I thought I would. And
worst comes to worst, we can call it. If people don't agree with that, that's not in their head canon, and they're not going to accept it as if it's an argument of purity. We can just say it was a one-off in between diversion. And we're back. Maybe we don't put it in the franchise rankings. How about that? Maybe that. Maybe
I just think it would be very fun. And I've heard that. I've just heard that for so long that I think it'd be interesting to treat it as part of what we're doing.
Yeah. Why the fuck not? We already have how many timelines we have. Sure. Why not? Let's do it. We'll do it.
Exactly. Yes. All right. Anyway, to your point, yeah, the realism of it doesn't matter to me because it's more chilling to be in the eyes of a serial killer. And what I love about this too is that there's so much talk about Michael's eyes through the movie and like how Loomis sees him in this idea that to him, you know, there's nothing but darkness. Like there's nothing there. He's nothing but evil, like pure evil. So to hear that repeated throughout the movie just reiterates how unsettling it is to open the movie from the perspective of that, because that means you opened the film from the eyes of the killer who is nothing but pure evil, and you're caught in the middle of it.
Yep. That's a great point. It's a very great point.
Like, isn't that crazy to think about? How unnerving is that?
Extremely unnerving. And to your point, it is actually going to be like exactly what you said it is. She was about being in the neighborhood, whatever. Because the whole thing is in a suburban neighborhood. It's in the in the beginning, also, not just obviously.
Yeah, because it's still Haddonfield.
But that killer's home, like it looks like a completely middle class suburban household. Well done, well kept up. These are not like Rob Zombie's. It's not like the alcoholic father, the stripper mother. None of that happening. This is all completely.
It's a normal family.
Normal family.
Yeah, like he was raised totally normal, it seems like, as far as we're aware. Like his sister cared about him very much. Now, was she hanging out with her boyfriend on Halloween instead of taking Michael out? Yeah, that's very true. But it's not like what you see in the zombie movies, which we'll get into. Like this is clearly a pretty functioning, normal family.
Right. As far as we know. I mean, we never get to hear much else of it. Obviously, it's the only time we ever see the Myers family, per se.
Right.
As we say, given, the Laurie side of it. Well, not in this film. Not in this film, anyway.
Correct. But so, it's a very quick scene. Michael is 6 years old, and he spends the next 15 years in Smith's Grove Sanitarium.
Oh, I love it's movie math. By the way, he's 6 years old here. He spends 15 years in the Smith Sanitarium. How old does that make him?
So 15 plus 6, that would be 21?
It's not 23 like the credits say.
No, probably not.
Again, those little things that like attention detail people in these days and age would be like, what the fuck? They don't even care about their own movie. They're saying he's 23. He can't be 23, 15. Like, people go off on it. Back in the day, whatever. Little movie mishap. It's all good.
It's what it is. I accept stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
look, 21, 23 doesn't matter, like, to me at least, right?
It doesn't, and it shouldn't. I guess that's my little commentary on today's
I agree with
film
you.
Twitter. What happens on film Twitter sometimes.
All right, it's my time.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's my time. We're tangenting a little bit here.
Oh.
Dear Film Twitter, just because movies don't always get it right or sequels change things doesn't mean that the people don't care about the thing that you think they care about. Furthermore, let the story play out before you start bitching about stuff for the sake of bitching about it. I saw this happening so much over Obi-Wan in the run of it because you are so obsessed with this idea that Star Wars fans think they know Star Wars better than anyone else. But Obi-Wan went out of its way to make sure that everything it was doing tied to exactly what it was known for being in Star Wars. And the lines of dialogue that mattered were connected. The things that had been set out in the original movies and the prequels mattered, and they tied it together as nicely as they could. And it worked. And yet y'all kept complaining that it broke canon or anything else. Guess what? Maybe you guys don't know how to fucking read your media. Maybe it's time for you guys to take some media literacy courses. Fucking learn. I'm not saying you have to like it, but to pretend that somehow that they broke canon or that Halloween is breaking canon or that any of these things are breaking canon is foolish nonsense, and you need to get over yourselves. Halloween is a perfect example of why this is the way that it is. Holy shit, you guys. Talk about breaking canon. We have 4 very distinct timelines that Michael Myers is hanging out in, and yet we're all fucking cool with it. You know why? Because we like the movies. It's really not that serious. Stop being so fucking beholden to shit to the point that you think that it can't be changed or whatever. Like, let it be. Enjoy it. Stop being fucking nonsensical about this shit and grow the fuck up.
If I had a Rotocaster, it'd be giving the big applause and behind you, or maybe I actually want to do the dun 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 dun, dun like the presidential kind of thing behind you. I was going to interject, but I agree with everything you're saying, and am
I wrong?
Let him ride. No, completely not. I completely fully agree with you. I'm right there with you. Don't judge something. First of all, especially in a TV series, don't judge something until it's over. You can like or not like an episode per se, but don't pick point reasons like that until you see how it plays out. If it played out at the end that you didn't like it, then you can have a conversation about it. Otherwise, let it go. Let people explain. Let the story explain itself, and then make your decision.
I think all of these people could learn to watch Frozen. Really listen to what Elsa's saying. Let it go, motherfuckers. Fucking relax. It's cool. I promise.
You might have seen a different Frozen than I did. She definitely didn't use any motherfuckers in there, but
I don't know. I saw one. I think Sam Jackson dubbed over it. It's great. That's what I'm looking at. But the point
let it go, motherfuckers. Let it go.
Just fucking let it be, man. Or listen to the Beatles. Let it fucking be.
Well, that's another one. Let it be. Let it fucking be.
I'm just saying, it's really not that fucking serious. And I know that I'm out here. I say this stuff all the time, but it's so true. Just engage with the stuff on its level. Stop trying to engage with it on the thing that you're putting on it. It's not fair.
I agree.
Just let it ride. If any of us can sit here and watch how many versions of the Halloween franchise or the Evil Dead franchise whose continuity is so beyond broken at this point that it's but it doesn't matter. It's part of the charm. Just enjoy shit.
Right. It doesn't have to matter. Just enjoy shit's the way to go. Enjoy it. There is definitely, I think there's a middle ground to be had. I do think that creators should at least make sure they're doing their best to
Yes!
avoid things like this here and there. But it is also the fans got to meet you halfway. You got to understand this is a fictional characters, fictional world. This is a world where like Michael Myers fucking in one time is pure evil, another time he's like a cult-like being from the cult of Thorn, another times he's killing. It doesn't matter. It's all different.
He's an abused child in another one. Like
right.
He grew up to be evil. He wasn't born evil.
Right. It is what it is. We have to accept these things are different variations. It's like you're going to have a different take on things. It's different. I think use the multiverse as your guide. Maybe it's a multiverse. Maybe it happened just a little bit off, and it's just a little sliver off, and it's okay to have a little sliver off. It still match up story wise in the end.
It's totally fine, and y'all need to relax. You want to know why George Lucas left? Because you guys kept fucking complaining. Lucas doesn't want to do it anymore. He was like, screw it. I'm giving it to Disney. You guys can yell at the Disney's, shareholders or whatever. Fine. Go yell at the suits. I'm out.
And more people want Lucas back than you could ever possibly imagine. It's funny how that works. But
it's almost like you all are never going to be happy unless you just relax.
Fucking
Frankie says fucking relax. Put that on a goddamn shirt. I'll fucking buy it.
I think we're just going to have to call this the Two Mediocre White Dudes on fucking Halloween.
I get very passionate, and I've been told that I swear like a sailor, and I apologize, but there's a reason that our podcast says that we are explicit on every platform.
That's true, because we are. We certainly are. Let's move on. Let's get us back on track. We had the opening sequence. We jump forward 15 years to find Dr. Loomis going with the nurse to transfer Michael from Smith's Grove to a different facility because of the law. It doesn't matter. It's a good conversation that sets up where we are. You get to see who Loomis is. Get to see Loomis's take on him. You don't need a whole lot to establish that Loomis thinks that Michael is pure evil and he's scared of him. And it's a great little momentary sequel. You get up to the Smith's Grove. You see the patients are all wandering around, and the nurse goes, "Oh, I wonder why they let him wander around."
Yeah. Is that normal? And it's like, no, this is not. And, I want to shout out the great Nancy Stevens, who plays this character, because she has been Marion Chambers in every capacity when they have brought her back, whether it was Halloween 2, whether it was H2O, whether it was Halloween Kills. She's always come back, and I've always loved that. It's just a nice bit of continuity.
I agree.
Every single time.
And that, by the way, is one thing you have to give 2018 and Halloween Kills credit for. Even if you have your differences with the films, and it's fine, you all have differences. The fact that they are very reverential to the people who were involved, to the point of like, we're going to get to people who, like Nancy Stevens, was barely in this movie. I don't even think she was credited as anything. Like, nurse, was she credited as nurse?
I believe it's under Marion Chambers, but I would have to look at the cast list again.
Right. I don't remember. Either way, I wasn't sure that was one of the things that the name came afterwards. Possibly. I don't know. Either way, people like that, they go back and they found these characters and try to get the same actors for the most part and try to get them back involved to play the same characters again. So it's very kind of cool to how the whole new franchise, or the whole new trilogy rather, has definitely played with the original film and given you little Easter eggs of stuff that they didn't need to, but it wasn't overdone in a way either, though. They were just name drop people that they name dropped before, people from the same town. Just gives it a kind of in-home continuity, which felt nice.
Also, I gotta say, we talk about this a lot in this idea that this is one of the standout iconic horror films, but it was built off the backs of other horror films before it, obviously, like Black Christmas and, of course, Psycho. Donald Pleasance's Sam Loomis is not the first character in a horror slasher film to be named Sam Loomis, because that is also one of the main characters in Psycho. This is such a clever nod, to be honest with you. I've always loved that, because there's something about the way they handle that. Like, John Gavin played him in the original film of Psycho. I just kind of like this as a love letter to that. And again, what is Nancy's name? Marion
Crane, buddy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Instead of Marion Crane, it's Marion Chambers, but it's very clearly a callback to Psycho in a lot of ways, and I find that so kind of cool. I mean, what a neat tie-in.
I fully agree. I loved so much about her coming back, and it's just a nice little way that they can, again, the nice little Easter egg that means something. There's definitely a way you can do an Easter egg or do a fan service, if you will. This is a good way to do it.
Yeah. So they're being at Smith's Grove. Michael attacks them as Loomis gets out of the car, and he's looking around and he sees everything. Michael climbs up the car. He starts to attack Marion, slams his hand on the window. It's a great sequence, actually. It's very, very tense, very terrifying. It works really well. He steals the car. He throws her out, steals the car, and he is on his way back. Evil has escaped fully, and he is on his way back to Haddonfield.
That's right. It's scary time.
Yeah.
Jump forward, go the next morning, and you get here's an interesting bit when it comes to the franchise history. So Laurie Strode, you meet Laurie Strode, 17-year-old girl, who, by the way, is probably and rightfully the greatest of the final girls.
100% at this point.
She's the definition of a final girl. And it's weird that she ended up creating a lot of tropes that weren't necessarily intended. For example, Halloween was always told to be it had this case of, it was a morality tale, and like it pushes that trope of that if you have sex, you're going to die. That Friday the 13th completely capitalized on.
Yes.
But it wasn't meant that way, because Laurie was never meant to be anything more than just an average girl who was a little smarter, a little bookish. It wasn't that she was against any of this stuff. She talks about going out with Ben Tramer. She talks about a lot. She doesn't care. She actually spokes up with Annie in the car at some point. I mean, this is not someone who's like very much completely. So I think they took the wrong things and amplified that to make their own little horror trope, whatever. But it is a great character, and that's the important thing. She's a great, relatable character to a degree. She's that not quite popular, she's not an outcast per se. Never hear her being an outcast, but she's not like a really popular girl either. She's just that teenage American girl.
I'm sorry,
but
oh, sorry. I was going to say, and to your point, she is, and I gotta love Jamie Lee Curtis's casting because she really sells it.
Yes, she is a phenomenal actress who I don't think has ever gotten quite the acclaim she should have gotten. Beyond Halloween, she's a great in other things as well. But I mean, this is where she definitely made her mark, obviously. But interestingly enough, the first time we meet her father, who we never see Laurie's parents except for this one moment we see her father. That's it the entire time. Her father is a realtor and says, drop off this key at the old Myers house for later on or whatever. Which, in terms of everything that we know now, it's fine, a normal thing. He runs Strode Realty, daughter going to do a favor for her. Now, given that, like, what happens later on, and we discover in like Halloween 2 that Laurie Strode is really Michael Myers' sister, Dad must know about this. So Dad's pretty kind of a sick favor for Dad to ask. Or go back to the place where your brother killed your sister and leave this key out.
And you were there when it happened.
You were there when it happened. Right, exactly. Like, those kind of things, like, doesn't matter. It's all about, obviously, that wasn't any intent behind this at all. This is happy. It's one of those kind of funny happenstances when you watch franchises. You go back, you have these thoughts that run through your head. That ran through my head when I watched Halloween 2 last time. Like, oh, wow.
It's just so funny. One of those,
Whoops.
How you think about these things in hindsight once you have more. Like, it's not a thing you really might think about very frequently, but that, very funny to me. Damn, Dad.
Now, damn it, Dad. What are you doing? Now, I don't want to fix it on, because as far as in Halloween, Laurie Strode is Laurie Strode, and there's no thing. And that's very important, I think, as far as it goes. So that's the last time I think I'll try to talk about the sister. The relationship does not exist as of yet.
And again, we got to say, man, what's so interesting is, who is she the daughter of in real life? Jamie Lee Curtis is the daughter of Janet Leigh, the star of Psycho. Again, very this movie ties back a lot to Psycho in a lot of ways. I actually think that they make a really good double feature because I think that they're both the best versions of a first film in a franchise that like does things very differently and like kind of lights the world on fire as far as slasher films is concerned.
Right. Agreed. Fully agreed. They're definitely horror classics. Like if there's a few horror classics in this world, those are two of the, and definitely top 10 of all time.
Oh, yes.
Might be fighting for 1 and 2, to be honest with you. But
to be honest, probably. So we pick up 1978. Loomis is now on his way to Haddonfield because he knows that Michael is going home. You know, again, what was the tagline of the film? The night he came home, and he knows exactly where Michael's headed. Michael apparently he steals the car, he kills a mechanic, takes the coveralls, gets all the things he needs, and grabs a mask from the local hardware store. He breaks in, and we have a whole scene where they're very confused about why the hardware stores. Yeah. And everyone's going, the alarm's going off, and they're going, someone broke into the store and took some random stuff, right. But it's probably just a bunch of kids. It's Halloween. We assume it's just, kids.
You always think it's kids, Dad. I love it. I don't know why. She's such like a typical, like, she's archetype type character. She's the promiscuous, just not necessarily a bad girl, but like, she's the antithesis of the all-American sweetheart girl that Jamie Lee Curtis's character is.
But I love Nancy Keys.
I do.
She's so good. She worked with Carpenter a few times, obviously, because she was also in Assault on Precinct 13. She's in The Fog. She's in Halloween 2. She was in Halloween 3. Like, she really only worked with Carpenter for the most part. She did like one other movie called The Sea Gypsies, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then she just stopped acting.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Like, yeah, Halloween 3 was her last movie, I think, her last feature film, I think it ever was, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny that she's in Halloween 3 as a different character, too. Totally standalone, like totally different character entirely, which is very interesting when it comes to the whole canon weird timeline thing. But either way, I do like she does do a great job here. She does a great job in all her films. I think the only film I haven't seen her is the Sea Gypsies one. But that's not exactly, she was a cameo in that, I think, or a small role in that as well. But yeah, you're right though. It is where we get with her, Annie. Before we go into that part of it though, we should just touch base really. Going back, I remember that because Laurie does go to the Myers house, drops the key off, and we see Michael Myers from behind the door. So Michael sees her, and that, my friends, is what really drives forward the stalking thing. It's not about her being his sister. It's the fact that she happened to be the person who went onto the Myers property when Myers was home.
Yeah.
Michael sees her and becomes fixated on her because of that.
This also becomes the first time we really start to hear the Michael breathing, yes. Which becomes so iconic in my opinion as the movies go, but especially in this one. And Dean Cundy, who did all of the film's DP stuff, he is so remarkable in capturing like this kind of, I want to say, emotionless fear of just like leaving a shot on Michael long enough that you hear the breathing and it's just very unnerving, and it really works. And he does it a lot. And so throughout the rest of the day, while Laurie is out, we see Michael slowly just kind of watching Laurie, following her in a car, on the streets, like anywhere she kind of looks, Michael's just kind of there. And it's always just standing. It very creepy. And I love that because, again, you asked about this earlier with these audiences, like how people react to it now. And I think that the truth of the matter is it doesn't matter how old you are watching this, I think. But if you watch it, especially when you're young, it's going to be unnerving because you really haven't, theoretically, you have probably not seen a whole lot of horror movies. So you're not going to feel the dated nature of the movie because, it feels like a 1970s horror film. But it's so timeless because it feels like it could have been anyone at any time. I think that you still gel with it. Now, do I hear the contrarian to that at this point? Yeah, I do. There's all these people who think that 2018 is the better movie because it's gorier and more, vicious. But it's like, that's not what makes Halloween scary. Right. And that's what makes this movie so special and stand out still, is that it's not about that. It's about the tension and the fear and the fact that the music is pulsating the entire time, getting under your skin. Carpenter's score is a big part of why this movie is so scary, because it's constantly playing on your nerves.
I was going to save that for another, its own topic, but at this point, you already broached it. John Carpenter's score is a separate character in the film, and John Carpenter, that's not just true for Halloween. When John Carpenter scores a film, it's so strange because it's just usually just a synth score. It's usually a very simple score. Yet, my God, it fucking works for the movies that he scores. And this is specifically entirely, the whole film has a basically it's not like a very variant score. There's like the main Halloween theme when you hear that one, which is always scary. And then there's this other like theme that plays thing that plays a lot. And that's like throughout the entire film. And yet, it just ratchets the tension up more and more. It's brilliant, an absolutely brilliant score. It's why I would have John Carpenter score almost anything I do, because he gets.
I mean, look, Firestarter came out this year. The movie's terrible, but his score for it is amazing.
I actually do want to watch it just for Carpenter's score. I will watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I seriously, I think my Letterboxd review was 2 stars, and it literally said these 2 stars are for John Carpenter's score and his score alone. Like, that's how good the score is, and that's how he always is. Every time he does it, he comes to play, and he really creates a mood, and so does Cundy. Like, Dean Cundy's cinematography similarly creates the mood. It creates the tension. Again, he put you in the eyes of the killer earlier on. There's a lot of these like longer lingering shots on Michael that are just fucking terrifying. And that's why it works. And the truth of the matter is, as we keep saying, this is a very simple movie. Laurie's going about her day after she has to go to school. She's going about her day. She's got to watch these kids on Halloween night. She's going to go over, she's going to hang out with Tommy Doyle because Tommy, is her kid that she babysits all the time, and they're going to hang out on Halloween, and she's just going to have a Halloween night. Like, she just wants to be a normal teenage girl.
Yep.
But for some reason, fate has intervened and put Michael and Laurie fucking center stage for whatever this is, which is he's the boogeyman.
Yeah. And I gotta say, one of the things about it is if there is a tale to be had about Nancy versus her friends, it's not about being promiscuous and being whatever. It's about the fact that Nancy.
You mean Laurie?
Laurie, yeah, I kept saying Laurie. You know what it is? I found this. I had been fixated on this since I read about this at one point. Did you know? Maybe you probably did know. And I actually knew this at one point, but I just rediscovered that Laurie house, the same house that Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street is in. That's just a great moment. Both those houses. So that's so fucking awesome. So, and Nancy's another great Final Girl, by the way, which we'll get into at some point. But Laurie's character is not about being promiscuous or being whatever. It's about that Laurie's character. Laurie pays attention to things around her. Like, Laurie watches what's going on. She notices the boogeyman a bunch of times. She's a nerd by it. She, more than anybody else, it's not that she has to act on it because she's just a kid. She's just a 17-year-old. She doesn't really know exactly what's going on, but she keeps her eyes open. And that's what eventually does save her in a way.
Mm-hmm. And again, shout out to Deborah Hill and John Carpenter for the script. And there's a real build with these characters that I find super fascinating because they feel real. They feel like real teenagers that are real people. And, PJ Souls obviously plays Linda, and Nancy Keys is Annie. Like, the camaraderie between the three of them, like, there's a lot of ragging a little bit on Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie, just because she's certainly more reserved than her friends.
Right.
But they still care. Yeah. But she still cares, and her friends still care about her, obviously.
100%. That's the greatest part about it. There's not the bullying things, which obviously gets overplayed in horror movies sometimes. This is just like kids ragging on. I mean, they rag on Annie too for being promiscuous in a way. They're joking about all the stuff he's going to do. I need a place to do this and all this. But it's okay. It's all good. They all know that they're just having fun with each other. It's good. It's good for the movie.
No, it's great for the movie, and it really works. And I think that's what continues to make this movie special, because there's really not a high body count in this movie. There's not a lot of gore. There's not a lot of death, but it's that there is death, and it's memorable because it's a small cast that is hunted one by one by a dude who's just stalking people like the boogeyman. I mean, look, truth of the matter is that when you look at the stuff that happens to Annie, he kind of toys with her.
Oh yeah.
Like he's straight up in that house for like 10, 15 minutes before he finally kills her.
Let me interject right there and say that's one thing that I think has been kind of lost in a way, is that the character, if you take Halloween as a standalone film, it's tough to do at this point. I really took a job. I watched this again today. I really wanted to try to look at this as best I could, saying I have not seen any of these sequels. I don't know anything about Michael Myers. What do I get from Michael Myers just from this movie? And he is pure evil, but there's a playful side to his evil. He likes setting things up. The whole scene with him, he's dressed as a ghost. The whole scene, like, he does set up the Judith Myers headstone, which is a great payoff from a scene earlier on in the film when Donald Pleasant, Dr. Loomis, goes to the grave looking for it. And, it's kind of greatly played.
These damn kids, they're, that whole, yeah.
And Sam Loomis knows something's going on, but like it kind of like forgets it. Like, and the audience kind of forgets it too, because like, okay, well, he took the HUD stuff, but then it comes back in this great, glorious ways. And as Laurie gets to find A on the bed with the Judith Myers headstone, like, oh, that's where it is. Holy shit. But it's all about what Michael would do, and that's what I think gets lost a little bit. Michael's a playful. Playful, maybe the wrong word, because it's not exactly.
No, he's toying with it.
He's toying with it. It's an evil side thing, but he does do that kind of thing to set it up. It's not just death. It's not about the death. It's not playing with it.
No, right, and he's pure evil. He's the boogeyman. He's not in it for anything other than the sake of doing it. It's something that happens to Annie too, because he toys with Annie before he finally kills her. Like, this is a very common theme throughout the whole thing.
Right.
Hence why I enjoy it so much. And the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, I wouldn't change a single thing about this, because it is so specific to this movie and what it's doing. I need it to stay this way, because this is Halloween to me. The simple man known as the Shape stalking people with no rhyme or reason. And that's what's still so scary about it, is there's really no rhyme or reason. And that's what Loomis keeps saying too. He's pure evil. And of course, Brackett even says, if this is true and anyone gets hurt, I'm blaming you. He's like, damn you for letting him escape, even though it really didn't have to do with him. But he's blaming Loomis for the fact that this is happening, because Loomis goes to them. He goes, look, this dude escaped. He's coming back here.
Right.
And they're all looking at him like he's crazy.
Right. Well, that's the funny thing about it, because Sam, he gets all the blame, because he's talking to the administrator, and he's like, well, damn you for letting it happen, letting this happen or whatever. And he's like, I did say everything. I did tell you everything, and you totally ignored me.
He's always been trying to tell people that he needed to stay locked up. Right. That was the whole thing. And so, again, it's just really, really smart writing. It's really great character work. And I really give Pleasance a lot of credit for the way that it's handled, because I don't think that Loomis would have been quite as interesting had he not been kind of made to be the villain, because everyone keeps flipping it on him. And here's the other thing. He and Laurie don't meet in the movie until the final scene. Like, that's a really important thing. There's really no interaction between the two of them.
Fully agree. I fully agree. It's funny you say that, because it's exactly the case. There's not a lot of interaction between any of the leads in the whole film. I mean, you get Loomis and Laurie get a very brief interaction at the end. Loomis and Michael get a very brief interaction at the end.
And the beginning, obviously.
The beginning
very
as well, but very, very small, but barely the whole thing. And that's what's cool. And yet, they drive the whole story forward, and that's what's great about it.
Yeah, because it's, we see a lot of movies these days where there's a lot of A, B, and C type subplots, and they all feel like they're kind of working independently. The A, B, and C plot lines in this movie are all interconnected. in like such a specific way that the drive feels the same no matter what. Everything is leading to one culminating moment. And I've always really appreciated that, because it could be easy to feel like any of these characters get lost in it or don't ultimately matter. But the truth is that every one of the characters matters. Every
single one of them. And that's what's great about it. Take a small cast and you have to give them have their own purpose. I remember sitting down at the end and watching the cast. I don't usually do that, at least not often. Like I said, actually sit to watch the credits go by. It's like there's not many characters there at all. It's not some glowing epic at all. It's a very small cast. But yeah, everyone's like, yep, they had their moment. Yep, they had their moment. Yep, they had their moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really special thing. And like the truth is that once Michael starts going one by one, it's just kind of fascinating watching it play out. But I do get some satisfaction at Loomis having a little bit of fun, all things being equal. Also, there's a great moment with him where he scares the kids.
I was going to bring that up.
Yes.
I was just bring it up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's so good. It's such a great moment because he's kind of seen these kids around and they're kind of dicks. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to fuck with these kids.
Letty, get your ass away from there.
Oh God! And they run off, and there's the smile on his face.
I was waiting. I watched the movie. I'm like, I'm gonna bring this up. I'm gonna bring this up on the podcast, and you just beat me to it. I'm happy they did it because we're on the same wavelength as usual. Exactly. It's like the one smile he has on his face the entire movie because he's had so much fun with it. And it is chef's kiss. It's that moment you need to really glom onto the character in a way beyond.
It humanizes him.
It totally humanizes him. It's a beautiful thing.
Because the whole time, it's so good. And because we see him this whole time as kind of like a crazy person.
Right. And he is.
For us and he is, but we're also reminded he's still human and he actually has like a soul and he actually cares about people. Right. It's such a fantastically well done moment that stands out for me.
And needed, because very interestingly enough, at one point, Pleasance changed something. I know at one point, if you remember when Loomis is on the phone on the way to Haddonfield, he stops at a payphone right where when he sees the truck that was broken down or whatever, or Michael got his jumpsuit or whatever.
Right.
He's on the phone. Originally in the script, it was supposed to be Sam Loomis calling his wife. And he's saying something like, no, I know, I haven't gotten sleep. I'll sleep as soon as I finish this case, or as soon as I finish finding him, or whatever. I'll come home and take a vacation, or something like that. And Pleasance talked to Carpenter and said, I don't think that's what Sam Loomis does. Sam Loomis is too fixated on this. He's too fixated on Michael in general. I don't think he has a wife. He's a lonesome person. Yeah, that's what he thinks. And Carpenter said, okay, you know what? That actually makes sense. The downside is it lost a chance to humanize Loomis in a way. But this way is actually better, I think, for the character. There's a little smile, little having him doing his thing. It's a part of still he's doing what he is fixated on. He's as fixated on Michael as Michael is evil. Like Loomis has really obsessive problems with the whole thing the entire time. What he does if Michael ever fully got caught and killed, I don't know what Sam Loomis would do. We get a hint of it, I guess, in 6 when he's kind of retired at that moment. But it's still kind of like a similar way. I appreciate this humanizing him better than a call to his wife.
Well, and also we have to remember, like in that way, we also had a very different opening with him where it was a deleted scene where he actually deals with the doctors at Smith's Grove. And he's like, you can't let him go. Right. And he's trying, again, what a great way to do that. Because it's putting an actual fear instead of a little bit of crazy. He's trying to protect people. So, it would have gone a long way, but I really like this moment because it's one of the only times that we get time with him in that regard. But the other thing is, and I want to focus on this a little bit, is his conversation with Brackett. We kind of talked about the evil and whatnot, but, he goes to Brackett and he goes, look, death has come to your town. And as Brackett starts to talk to him, and he's like, well, why did you let him go? And he's like, look, I didn't. I tried to stop this. And he even goes, when I met him 15 years ago, I was told there was nothing left. Like, there was nothing inside of him. Like, everyone just saw him as having no understanding of life, death, good, evil, right, wrong. Like, so when he finally saw the kid and he looks and he goes, he had blackest eyes I've ever seen. He called them the devil's eyes.
Right.
And, you know, he says that he spends all this time trying to talk to him, trying to reason with him, trying to find anything inside of him. But no, all the 8 years that I did that, I realized that there was nothing there living behind that boy's eyes than evil, like purely and simple evil. And again, he tries to keep it contained. He tried to keep it locked up in Smith's Grove, and of course they let him out. But it's just so interesting. I love Loomis as a character. He's so cool. Loomis rules. He's just so fun. And again, it's because of Pleasance. Like Pleasance really, really makes it. But also, we need to shout out Nick Castle, playing Michael throughout the movie, because he
famous
brings the character to life.
Famous director Nick Castle of Major Pain. And
yes. And Dennis the Menace.
Dan Levine, we love you.
Yeah. You know, we did the thing. We did the thing. Last Starfighter, also, right? Or
yes.
Is it Last Starfighter, Nick Castle. So, you know, very fun for us. But for real, Nick Castle's great. And the thing that I like so much is that his movements feel just kind of there and just very like they're weirdly ominous without being ominous.
Right. Oh, he does just the right thing on occasion. One thing that really got me also, it was jumping ahead a little bit. We're going to jump back. But one of the, particularly Nick Castle's movements is after Laurie, he surprises Laurie falls down the stairs. And he mixes his movement where he just kind of walks and stops at the top of the stairs to look down. And it's so fucking scary before then he starts walking down. But it's that way he moves, stops, boom. It's so, I don't even know what to say about it. But Nick Castle does some great movements throughout this entire piece.
Well,
another one of them.
I mean, that's one of the all-time greats. And of course, my favorite, it's my favorite kill in the movie. It's my favorite kill in the franchise, probably still, to be honest with you. But it is when he goes and offs Bob. When he pops out of that door and he grabs Bob and he stabs him against the wall, pins him there, and then takes a step back and tilts his head. Like he's admiring his work. And again, it's a simple thing. And, you know, Castle's talked about it where he was like, Carpenter would tell me to do that. And I was like, why would I do that? But then you see the final product and it's just like, it's a simple movement, but it's unnerving because he's looking at this like, look at what I've done. Look at the creation of what I have done in this. Like it's such a small thing, but dear God, does it work?
It's so evil and it's so beautiful. So much so, it's a very iconic moment. Just like I agree, it is one of my favorites in the entire franchise as well. And it's obviously other people's favorite as well because it's aped very well in Halloween Kills at the Myers house.
It is.
It's exactly bookended by it where he comes out a little bit further back the shot, a little bit longer distance. But when Michael comes out with the speed that he has, and it's such a powerful shot. Oh God, I love Halloween Kills.
Do you know what I also didn't realize until this watch through for the first time? Really, I don't think I realized just how much time we spent in the Myers house and in the room where everything happened. And it was just interesting because I had never really thought about it. And then, like, thinking back to Kills, I'm really impressed with how well built out they redid the house and how well it looks because it's a very specific design. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking ahead and I was like, wow, Kills really nailed that, actually. Like, really, really nailed that because you spend a lot of time in that house in Kills. So it was actually kind of a nice feeling where I was like, it just goes to show how much David Gordon Green and everyone kind of cares about the franchise and the continuity and how it looks and how it feels, and very interesting to me.
Well, I will say that's also where we first discover that Michael Myers has a taste for canine. Not the only time he's a dog. I don't know why he decides to do that. Like, it's kind of one of those weird things you never have to know. You don't have to know why. It's not something you have to worry about. But he broke in to get a mask, could have broken in somewhere else and got a turkey on rye if he really wanted to. But he didn't. He got a dog and ate it because he's pure evil.
What a weird thing.
2 dog deaths in this movie.
Yeah. Like, one of them off,
off camera. We actually don't see it at all. I was just mentioned that he was eating the dog. So he said, this is a line that threw me. That he goes, a skunk did that. a skunk? Dude, that's I get to not like, Brackett, what are you talking about? Did not vibe with me at all. If the dog's sitting there half eaten, maybe that's the difference between what Brackett's actually seeing supposedly and what I'm visualizing we're seeing. But if he was eating the dog, I'm visualizing something that a skunk definitely couldn't have done.
But look, go ahead.
There's the second time, and later on he does kill the Wallace's dog, where Annie was barking at Annie and then barks at him, and he kills that dog as well. And God, that's usually awful for me. I usually can't stand watching animals die.
No, this is one of the few where it works, and I don't love it, but obviously, like, there's something about the way it's shot. Again, shout out to Dean Cundy and the work that he did on the film, where the animal's legs just go limp. Yeah, that it really hits you because he senselessly kills a dog.
And I guess I don't want to use the word. Watch it. I don't want to use the word tasteful as to how to describe it, but Cundy's filmmaking, Cundy's shot of it is tasteful for what it has to do.
Correct.
The most tasteful it could have been. So.
Yeah, and so we're on Halloween night. The cast is split across, obviously, as we've been kind of talking about. Laurie is over at the Doyle house watching Tommy, and Annie is over hanging out at the Wallace house, and she is taking care of Lindsay. And again, having everyone split up, you have Linda off with Bob, and they're doing their thing, and it leads to the idea that they're so separated, not realizing that this is happening, because one by one, Michael starts killing them off. And them being all separated the way they are, no one really has any idea. And that moment when he finally gets to Annie and he strangles her in the back of the car before slitting her throat, it's a visceral experience, because, again, the camera just sits on it, just lets it happen. And you're just sitting there watching it. And you can't do anything. And, again, I really shout out Dean Cundy, because there's something about the way that the shot sits where you want to do something and you can't. Like, I feel helpless. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel helpless. I want to help and I can't.
Right. And it's like one of those horror tropes as well. She goes into the car. It's funny. She goes to get the car in the car, and I couldn't tell, but did she pull the thing and it was locked? Because I felt like she pulled it was locked, then went and got the keys, came back and pulled it and it was open. And that was like your first hint that something was wrong. I might have been overlooking at that as well. But the thing you do see for sure is she gets in and she sees obviously the condensation on the window. And that's it's a great moment. It's like you're thinking to yourself, well, obviously somebody's in there. But if you were Annie at that time, who's not conditioned to watch horror movies or whatever, I guess, so you go in there and you see that, you do get a little well, why is this? And then the kill happens. But as an audience, you're right, because you know what's going on. You're like, fuck, he's in there. Get away. And you can't do anything.
No, you can't do anything. And I just love that so much. And, of course, Lindsay goes across the street. She starts hanging out with Laurie and Tommy. And one of the things I love, by the way, is they're watching The Thing from Another World, which is such a funny little moment, because, of course, Carpenter goes on to remake that just a few years later in The Thing.
Yep. It's so good.
It's such a funny little, that's Sam Raimi putting Doctor Strange's name in Spider-Man 2 as a joke, only to direct a Doctor Strange movie later. Something very just kind of cutesy and fun about that in a hindsight sort of way. But one of the things I really like about this too, and again, this is a humanizing Laurie sort of thing, is when she's spending time with Tommy, she's kind of reading to him, and he wants to read King Arthur, or she was reading him King Arthur, and she goes, I thought this was your favorite. And he goes, nah, I've moved on for that. I like superheroes now. And my mom, and she, he pulls him out, and she's like, why are you hiding these? Well, my mom doesn't like him. And she starts rattling off what he's been reading, and she's like, well, I can see why. But I like her relationship with them, because there's a really fun little give and take with her and Tommy, that she clearly cares about this kid. You know 100%. What I mean?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, and so once Lindsay gets there, and there's kind of the the give and take of, oh, you guys clearly have a crush on each other, and it's kind of cutesy and plays out, and it works because, again, now you're heightening the stakes because you're putting kids in the mix, not just teenagers. There's now 2 children in the mix of this, and he already killed a dog.
Right.
He's not going to have any problem to kill these kids. Is your mindset now? He killed an animal. He will kill all of them.
Well, not only that, but it's interesting though because we actually that's obviously we didn't mention before the time where Michael does show some restraint in a way, which is weird because you don't ever think of Michael ever showing restraint. As always, you see Michael, he's going to kill somebody, but he does go around town. He does stalk Lori. At one point, he actually runs right into Tommy. Tommy runs down. He grabs him in a way and lets him go. And it's like a very freaky moment, but it's like, wow, okay, so this is Michael who actually can walk around town. Obviously, he doesn't have the mask on at that point, because that might have been a little bit too much. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting to see. When does he put the mask on? Does he walk around town with the mask on? I mean, we notice him without with the mask on. A few times we do see him, like in the bush and about the thing.
Right.
But, like,
actually, that's a great question because, I mean, again, jumping farther ahead, obviously Halloween Kills has all those flashbacks but it's all the night sequences. Right?
Yeah.
But as far as we're concerned, we never see his face throughout the day, like on those shots. They always hide it if you see him walking in some capacity, like that one in particular. You never see his face. It's shot from the shoulder down. So maybe he doesn't have it on. But they make it a point also that you really don't see his face, period. Right. Because that one moment where the mask comes off, he panics and he pulls it back down. So I have to think he's actually wearing it.
I got to think that too, but what makes it weird about it, so therefore he's walking around a bunch of kids with this. I mean, it is Halloween. So it is a Halloween, and maybe that's what it is. I mean,
but also, when we first meet Michael, he's in a clown mask.
Yeah, that's true too.
So I think, I mean, it's the one thing the zombie movies did very well was dealing with the fact that Michael obviously feels like he needs to hide behind a mask. He probably is wearing it because I think he only sees himself behind a mask.
We do see him. Like I said, we do see Jamie Lee Curtis see him from a distance, so you could definitely see the mask at that point. Whether it's in the garden, whether it's in behind the car, behind the bushes, he's definitely wearing the mask at that point. But I don't know if it's wearing the mask when he sees Lori and they take it off. Otherwise, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting because at this point we don't know how important the mask is. Like you said, I guess it's never really dealt with until the end but that's during the hype of the moment. Maybe the mask is when he gets like in kill mode. It's like activate kill mode, I gotta put the mask on. When I'm not in kill mode, he takes it off. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's part of it. We don't really know. There's a possibility that's the case.
It's just so interesting to me. I really love it, and it's an interesting conversation.
Speaking of that, though, honestly, and again, maybe I shouldn't jump forward, but it makes sense as we're talking about it now. When the mask does come off, were you surprised at how much we saw of his face?
I think I always have been, because the truth is we really don't see much more of it at any other time.
Right.
Ever. Like, for the most part. No one really. It's weird.
I felt like it's been such a big deal. We don't see Michael's face, whatever, that like what I did see. I think it's true. I think every time I watch the movie, I'm always surprised at how much we see.
Yeah. And I think that I think about that a lot just because, again, we don't see it a lot after the fact.
Right.
Ever. And so I almost wish we hadn't, but it almost feels so viscerally in the moment that you don't think about it again. And we don't, like, I don't think it's until Halloween and really Halloween Kills where you kind of see it again, but it's always like from the side. It's never even fully a face shot in the same way.
Yeah. And there's a moment I have to remember in 5.
Yeah.
We get a glimpse of it again because Jamie takes it off.
Right.
Like in the coffin or wants to take it off, whatever it is. But interesting. It's interesting how they play with how important it is or isn't. But either way, yeah. Anyway, that's a digression. We'll get back to where we were. We were basically in the area. Go ahead.
And real quick, I just want to throw it out here. You know, we were talking about all the stuff about Loomis and what have you. You know what my favorite little side note on all this is? Christopher Lee later told John Carpenter that the biggest regret in his career was turning down Halloween. Did you ever know that? Yeah. He said his biggest regret was declining the role.
Wow.
And he should have ultimately done it. But again, I can't see literally anyone else doing it now. to be honest with you.
Yeah, how would you have seen, like trying to think about it, how do you think that would go?
Very differently.
Yeah.
It would have been a very different performance, I feel like. I also don't know if Lee would have come in and rewritten things in the same way that like Pleasance did. You know what I'm saying?
I would say that just from the little things I do know about Christopher Lee, obviously I haven't followed his career. I mean, he's a legendary actor, of course, but like I've only really heard behind the scenes tales from his time in Star Wars and in Lord of the Rings, and he was pretty forward about what he thought was good or what he wasn't thought was good about things.
Yeah, but that's a little different because he actually knew Tolkien.
Yeah, Star Wars, he did similar for Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars. Well, it's also George Lucas, you know.
No, maybe he's maybe he opens up for a collaborative. Maybe some directors are more open to collaboration. I gotta feel like Lee might give something forward about it, which I as much as I love Pleasance, I would love to see this alternate universe just to see what it would have been.
Someone open the multiverse so we can check this out.
I know, right now. God damn it. That's what multiverse is good for. It's the only thing it's good for, checking out alternate castings.
Correct.
All right. Anyway, so where are we? We're back to so we're at he strangles Annie in the car and basically takes him out one by one, takes out Annie. The Bob and Linda bit is great. We mentioned before the ghost costume, the getting me a beer, that kind of thing. I love the fact that they're very open about sex. They're not nothing graphic about it. Something they really in your face about it. It's just something that happens. But it does seem to have something to do with Michael's mindset. He does seem to not like, I don't know if sex is the thing that kicks off Michael's gear or whatnot. Like he sees his sister having sex and that's what he decides after 6 years or whatever to make the move, or he sees he's playing. I don't know. Maybe it is a trigger to him, but he definitely plays him at that point. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, to the toying nature of Michael, it's like him messing with PJ Souls the way he is, you know. Linda just sitting there and then being strangled to death on the phone, and Laurie's hearing it and has no idea.
Yeah, she thinks it's an obscene phone call.
Yeah, she thinks it's just an obscene phone call, and yet at the same time, it is not. She is listening to her friend being murdered on the phone. Again, what a creepy, scary, horrible thing to have happen, and you have no idea. Right. Again, the brilliance of this movie, the way that it is handled is that it is scary and terrifying, and it gets under your skin because you have no idea that it's happening. Right.
And now, right before Laurie goes over to check out, because she is a little concerned, but she's kind of like, you know, obviously we had the phone call before where we're kind of another joke thing. Obviously, it seems like this is kind of a running joke in their little friend circle. They do kind of like joke phone calls. But she takes it serious enough that she wants to check out what's going on. We get to see Loomis at the Myers house, kind of getting tired of hanging around there, I think. This is a weird thing. Again, one of those things, it's like the stormtrooper bumping his head in A New Hope. It's like, it's a silly, stupid thing, and but you accept it, and it's fun. He just now notices the car. Like, obviously, Loomis has been there for, like, I don't know how long, like 5, 6, 7 hours this way, 80 hours.
He's been there all day, basically.
All day. And all of a sudden, at the end, I turn and goes, hey, that's that car. Now the car's been there for a while because Michael's been busy for a while. So like, all of that's when he discovers it. That made me laugh today, probably unintentionally. One of the things where, again, it probably would have been nitpicked up the wazoo today, but it just made me chuckle. It's pretty funny. Look at his face.
And again, I really don't mind it. Like, it's just good filmmaking. It's fun filmmaking. And I like that it adds a sense of, you know, to your point, how did you not notice? Oh, well, it is what it is. Like,
right.
Also, we got to talk about who taught Michael to drive. Just wondering.
That's funny, actually. That's pretty funny.
I think about that a lot.
It's been a question of the fandom for a long time, too. And it's true. Who knows? Like I said, maybe they won't, like Sam Loomis said, maybe somebody had to teach them, give them lessons. That's one of the things. The funny thing that made me laugh too is that during the way back in the time, in the beginning of the film, after he escapes, Sam and the administrator having the argument. He's like, it's 150 miles. He can't drive. Well, he was doing pretty damn good last night, wasn't he? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's so good.
Interesting enough, I read an interview with the novelization guy, Curtis Richards, whose real name I think is Richard Curtis. great pen name to switch your last name with your first name. And he said that there actually there's a couple lines of dialogue in the book that deal with that and say that like that he let Michael drive around like the gardening truck sometimes with the gardener or something.
Yeah, there we go. All right, that's fine with me. I mean, look, I really don't care. I just always thought it was very funny. Which also, actually, I want to say I skipped over this a little bit, but to the point of how scary it is that he was stalking them. That one moment where he's driving down the street and he goes slow, speeding kills, and he slams on the brakes, and like the shot just kind of lingers. Yeah. And you're like, oh shit. And then he leaves.
Right.
But it's such a great moment. And I love Laurie going, Annie, one day you're going to get us all in big, big trouble.
Yep.
And it's kind of not wrong.
No, not at all. And it's a funny moment. I do like that one as well. Because it's also, again, well scored. Like, because it's scored, Carpenter scored, also it gets a look, you're like, oh, something's about to go down. But it doesn't. And we lit on. So Laurie goes over to the Wallace house, and that's where it's kind of like she gets bombarded. All of a sudden, she obviously opens the door and finds Annie, like spread eagle on the bed, pretty much, with the big Judith Myers tombstone. And like, holy fuck, now you imagine yourself as a 17-year-old coming on your friend like that. Like, what the fuck? But then she doesn't even get a chance to really respond. Because also then she turns and there's, boom, swinging down. And then she sees Linda, and the closet door thing opens. She's just bombarded with, oh my God, all of my friends are fucking dead. Holy shit.
It becomes a fucking horror show so quickly for Laurie.
Right. So bad. And that great shot. One of my favorite shots in the entire franchise. Laurie freaking out, just backing up. There's an open doorway. It's completely black. And then all of a sudden you just see just the hint of the mask. It's not even completely visible, but you see the mask there before you strike. It's so good. It's so good.
It's so good. It's incredible filmmaking. It's incredible cinematography. Like, everything about it is so great. And this leads to, Laurie screaming, running out the door, trying to, Tommy, let me in. And I love this because Michael's the slow stalking is so like creepy, and it's so unnerving. And she's trying so hard, and call the cops, get out of here. Go next door, call the cops. And she's trying so hard to protect them, but also trying to fucking run for her life because all her friends are dead now.
Mm-hmm.
It's so creepy when Michael appears and he slashes her arm, but and of course she's just sitting there petrified, obviously, about what happened. She falls down the stairs, so she's got this limp now on top of everything else. And she's just trying to get out of the house, get back to Tommy, get back to the kids, save the kids, get away. Like, imagine that. You walked into this house, your friends are all dead. You saw the person who did it. You fell down the stairs. You're limping. You're hurt. He slashed your arm, and you're all you can do is like fight or flight.
Right.
And hers is flight because she's thinking about the kids.
Mm. Well, also, the fun part about that is, like, let's face it, she has a fucking pretty shitty, or that's not really her neighbor because she doesn't live there, but the fucking neighbors in that town are very fucking shitty. You get the 17-year-old girl screaming, help me, going to the door of the next door neighbor, bang on the door, saying, oh my God, help me. You see somebody that look out and go, close the window. She goes, turn off. But the outside light comes on first. You see the window, turn down the shades, turn off the light. We're not going to listen to this guy. What the hell? I hope people don't want to get involved sometimes, but it's like, I can't imagine if I had a 17-year-old girl like knocking on my door that I at least wouldn't have called the police or something, like try to like, or I always would have said something or try to help somebody out. Besides just going,
and the thing is I almost would have thought that the town would know better, but the truth is that because the sheriffs try to keep everything under wraps and nothing's really gotten out about any deaths or anything, no one knows any better.
That's true.
And that's the other thing. Actually. Yeah. And again, I wanted to say that that's one of the things I like about this so much. And part of the reason that it's still so unnerving is that imagine not knowing. Imagine having no idea. And that's real life. People have probably lived next door to serial killers and anything else, and you have no idea.
No idea what's going on at all. It's scary. But
it's scary.
But yeah, that's I just want to point out the shitty neighbors that are in Halloween.
Yep.
Don't want to live in Haddonfield for that reason. But then she goes back. It's probably, and you think about it, it probably was a mistake for her to go back in terms of if that put the kid in danger now, because Michael probably wouldn't have gone into the kids if they weren't. He was obviously fixated on Lori at that point. But she's a 17-year-old kid, and she wants to, all she can think about is barring herself in the place that she knows at that point and calling the cops.
Right. And of course, she finds the phone is dead. Michael's killed the phone line. So he comes in through the window. He attacks her again. Lori fights back. She stabs him with a knitting needle. And again, what a great moment. And then we have the shot of Lori with the knife, like looking over and he's dead. Don't worry about it. He's dead. But of course, she goes upstairs. She finds the kids. She's checking on them. Michael comes back. He's alive. He attacks her again. And it keeps just kind of happening. It keeps escalating. And that's what I love. Lori hides in the closet. And here's the thing about this third act. Yeah. And this whole third act here's the thing. This whole third act is maybe top 2 or 3 horror finales of all time.
Oh,
and it continues to be. Because from the moment that Lori walks into that house and sees the dead bodies to the final shots of this movie, my tension is ratcheted up to 11. And I've seen this movie well over 100 times. Easily.
Oh my God.
It's so it's so masterfully done. I get goosebumps thinking about it, but that shot of Lori in the closet as Michael's ripping through, trying to catch her and trying to get to her is so terrifying. And because it feels animalistic.
It is. It really is.
It is, right? Like, it's so animalistic.
And she stabs him with the hanger. She does a good job of undoing the hanger and actually slicing it at him or whatever, knocks him down or whatever. Like, is it again? Is it good now? Obviously not if you're a horror fan. But I kind of feel like a lot of people who saw this might not have been horror fans. That wasn't as much of a trope yet as like the horror villain who couldn't die, so to speak. But it is a great way because then he gets it back with by the way, really quick, I find it funny. Just rebounding a little bit. She's banging on her front door. Tommy, let me in. She like throws the plant up, and Tommy's like, what? Now Tommy, meanwhile, who's been petrified of the boogeyman all night. Yep. He's seen Michael Myers like twice, I think, and third time at school, really. And he's, oh my God, boogeyman. He gets so scared, he calls Lori over to look, and of course, Michael Myers gone at that point, so he doesn't see anything. But this is the time when boogeyman's actually there, and he's kind of like, what? All right, I'm gonna walk on down. And obviously, Lori's freaking out, and he's kind of like, "What, bitch? God!" It's
like every time Frank Janish is around us, and we're like, "Frank, we need you to do something." He's like, "God, I don't know, man.
What? I don't know." But Frankie, we love you.
Yeah. But look, seriously, it's so good, man. And the tension is ratcheted up. Of course, the kids get out of the house. They go running out, and, Loomis finds them. He's in the house. The boogeyman. Who? Where? Which house? That house. The boogeyman. Like, the boogeyman. And it's so chilling. And
it is.
The thing that I love is that at the end of the day, Lori fights as hard as possible, but she's petrified. And it leads to that last shot, man. Fucking Loomis goes into the house, and Lori rips the mask off. That's when we see him.
Right.
But Loomis shoots him 6 times, and he falls off the balcony. And you watch the body fall off the balcony, and Lori's just crying. And it was that the boogeyman, and Loomis says, yes, that was the boogeyman. And then he looks over the balcony, and the body's gone. And here's what I love. Not just that.
Oh, God,
I know. But here's the brilliance of this, right? Not only does Michael get away, the body's gone. They're terrified. He's been shot. She's crying. Is it the boogeyman? Yes, it is. The single shots, the static single shots of the houses, the neighborhood, the breathing, like you're just hearing Michael's breathing over these shots of places that of things you've seen, and then cut to credits.
He could have been anywhere.
He could have been anywhere. It could have been anywhere, anyone at any time. There's no ending.
No ending. That's what's so brilliant about it. Because this is not written with a Halloween 2 in mind. This is written as a standalone. This is all it's going to be. This was it. And that, if there was never a franchise, that's the end of it right there. Is that Michael gets up, walks away somehow, and is just somewhere waiting to strike again. The same night, even. We're just like ending a movie midway through almost in a way. But it worked. It was a powerful ending. And I got to say, I had goosebumps thinking about it too. Michael gets shot, thrown over. He says, yeah, he's the same thing he says to Laurie about being the boogeyman. He walks over, and as soon as he looks down and sees that empty space, great shot, suit perfectly the same shot. One has Michael's body in it, one doesn't. Score starts. Donald Pleasant's face is a masterclass of acting, because there's so much going on
fear
behind that. It's this fear. It's just anger. It's this fuck me. It's this like tired. All we're going to one.
Yeah.
How? What do I do next? Helpless. And I realized I actually flashed in my head in a minute, like when I was watching it this time, like as far as we know, Tommy and Lindsay are still out there, like outside, possibly with Michael Myers at this point. You never know. That's how it could have ended. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, holy shit. And
honestly,
again,
though,
Laurie's sobbing, and it just ends the way it does with the breathing and with the metaphor for he could be anywhere. Watch your step. Michael's going to get you. Boom!
It's brilliant, is what it is. And again, like, big ups to them being like, we were going to just not give you a real ending, like at all. Like, I mean, it's a real ending. Don't get me wrong, but there's not going to be closure, because imagine that they had never made a sequel. It would go. I mean, it's still an all-time ending, but imagine that horror film never getting another one. It would go down as an all-time moment, because the killer is still out there and we never get there again. Now, obviously, there's no world where they're not going to do that, because Halloween made so much money. I mean, again, it was made on like $300,000. It made almost $70 million or something overall. Like, are you joking? Of course you're going to make another one. It rips so hard, man. Like, this movie is incredible. It's a masterpiece. And I can't say enough things about the fact that they took the idea of suburban America and turned it into a horror show. Not that people hadn't done this. You know, we have a friend named Lego who we were talking about this a little bit yesterday after I'd watched it. I had tweeted about it. And, you know, during the Cold War and stuff, we definitely had a lot of films that was about your neighbor's the villain. Like, obviously, The Twilight Zone is famous for that. Like, that's an all-time famous episode in the middle of the Cold War. But the thing about this here is that, again, a lot of the time when it came to horror films, you were going to a different place, right? Like, the Universal monsters are all existent in other countries or other places that are not your home, or another time period that is not your own.
Right.
Like, you're never in a place where you were put in the moment. Or you left. Again, Friday the 13th, you went to a summer camp. You went tourist trap is, you know, off on a touristy, like, tourist trap. Those things that you find. Like, all those things are how these things went. You were usually in a place that was not your own. Haunting, you know, House on Haunted Hill. Mm-hmm. Hills Have Eyes. Every once in a while, sure, like, you know, Last House on the Left, or, you know, what was When a Stranger Calls? Sure, every once in a while, but more often than not, you were put in a situation that was not your creation. And Halloween forced you to rectify this idea that it could have been anyone or anything. It took the idea that pure evil of Psycho, a pure evil of checking into a place and you have no idea what's there. But now this person is got a mask and is now roaming a town, your home. This is your house. You should be safe here, and you're not. This is your town. This should not happen here. And I love that, because that is what makes it so scary.
Man, you're saying everything I want to say about this, and it's exactly what it is that it is the ultimate in audience interaction without being interactive, an interactive movie. I always talk about what's the character that the audience gets the experiences through. That's what's always talked about in any kind of fiction. They want the audience to have that character they can relate to, that they get to visualize this through. The whole movie is all about this. The original Halloween, it places you in this moment with Michael Myers, with Laurie Strode, with Dr. Sam Loomis, with Lee Brackett, who I gotta say we haven't talked about much in this episode. I love this character. I think Lee Brackett's a great character. He's not a bumbling sheriff at all. Like people like usually in these kind of films, and actually Halloween gets that way sometimes later on. But in a lot of these horror films, the sheriff is a bumbling failure who just doesn't listen to anybody and is a big reason why a lot of the shit happens. He does everything I would expect a small town sheriff to do. He's like a little slow to believe things a little bit, but he doesn't like hold things up. He's like, all right, I'll give you your 10 minutes to talk to me. All right, I'll go to the house. We'll check it out. But like at the same time, nothing happens for a while. Okay, well, I got to do what I got to do. I got to see what's going on. You know, anything happens, calls me. He's a good father, generally a good father. Although I will say, one of the other little stormtrooper hitting the head moments. Laurie and Annie go smoking pot, and then come up to the hardware store with the alarm ringing, and then they open the door after quitting. And you're saying the sheriff couldn't smell the pot of them?
Yeah, but Laurie brings that up.
That's true. He does say that.
Laurie 100% even brings that up. He could smell it. No, he couldn't. He couldn't. And she's like, no, he could. I think he did. He's just
maybe he didn't care. He's just ignoring it, which is kind of going away. I guess that's true. Maybe just the cool father of the 70s, which is also a little weird. I guess I don't know. I guess because it's the time frame, it's hard to imagine what would be like that as far as his view on pot or whatever kind of thing.
And you know what's so funny about all this? Is that suburban America over the next few years becomes a hot spot for stuff like this because Spielberg leans in on it on E.T. and then again Poltergeist, and that's not a bad thing. But suburban America starts to become more and more prevalent. The Gate, almost 10 years later becomes the same thing. We started to see a lot more of this idea that terror was in your own backyard sort of thing. And I think a lot of it stems from here because it really opened a door to being like, look, what happens if the supernatural or the horror is real and is in your place? Not just like Cold War type spook stuff, but real terror, real science fiction, real horror monsters. I will never get over that. I just think it's such a cool thing.
I agree. But just going back real quick to Lee Cyphers, right? Lee Cyphers? What's it? It's
the actor, you mean?
Yes, the actor.
Charles
Charles Cyphers. Yeah, Lee Brackett, Charles Cyphers. I knew it wasn't Lee Cyphers. In my head, I can't remember. God, I'm old. I drank too much. My brain cells are a little fried. But
it happens.
Charles Cyphers, who's very much a Carpenter person. He's in a lot of the Carpenter films. And then he also makes his return finally in Halloween Kills as an old retired sheriff who's at the hospital. I love what he gives. He always puts in a great performance. He's never going to be leading. He was never a leading man, never a number one guy, but he's that kind of guy that adds so much to the film just by being a good, solid presence. That he's underrated. I think people take him for granted sometimes, but I do shout my appreciation. Another great moment when Nancy. I was like, why do I keep saying Nancy? God, I want to watch Nightmare on Elm Street. I guess when Laurie runs into him. And it's the joke. Like, well, it's Halloween. We're all entitled to one good scare, right? It just the delivery. It's so fatherly, so sheriffly. It's a great small character that I wanted to shout out for giving us a little bit more in the film.
I mean, he's one of the only last major characters that we didn't talk about, so it's only fair. To be honest.
I'm glad I got the moment to do so because I would feel bad if we didn't. But yeah, so that's pretty much at where we are. Can I just say real quick? I'm looking at the time. I just glanced at the time. We're almost as long as we did for Lord of the Rings on a 91-minute movie.
We have surpassed the runtime by quite a bit, actually, of the movie, and I'm not mad about that. It just goes to show, number one, how much there is to talk about, but again, too, we spent a lot of time kind of setting the table. There's a lot to unpack with this franchise, and I love that. I love that we just got to gush so hard about this movie and all the stuff that is going to come with that, because again, this is one of my favorite franchises. I adore these movies. Even when they're bad, I will always have fun watching them. So, it's really special, and I'm really glad that we got to do it. And again, dude, you're just asking me to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies, what? Are you kidding me? That's the best. I'm going to put it as much into that as possible.
Never going to turn that down.
No. And again, I'm going to be so annoying by the time this is over because I love these movies so much. Like, that's just how I'm going to be. I apologize in advance, but I have no chill when it comes to Halloween. I just don't.
I am the same way exactly. That's what he put us together. This is what's going to happen. Before we do leave, though, where I say goodbyes or anything you want to finish up on, you want to say one last thing about, and then we'll get going.
Actually, yeah. We probably should have stopped and talked about this up top. Now that I think about it, yeah, I'm sure that you guys are aware, but PLD and I have known for a little bit that the Schmodown's coming to an end, and that was a weird thing for us. And we've kind of been thinking about it for the last couple of weeks. We'd had a heads up, and we're kind of in a state of flux right now. But the cool thing for you guys is it's going to give us a lot of time to sit down with the podcast and do a little bit more, because there's not a lot of work for us right now left on this. We've got 5 matches left to write for Spectacular, for as far as we're both aware. I don't know if that's even really out there. Probably shouldn't have said that out loud, but as far as we're aware,
to be fair, I'll interject and say 5 matches. There could be more. We don't know. That we don't actually have a listing of the matches per se. Is this something we?
No. We have no idea what's actually happening. Like, I want you guys to be aware. We have no idea what the matches actually are. We're just yeah. We've just been told that's likely what we're looking at. It's been really, really hard. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I lost my only source of income. It was my only job. I dedicated all of my time to this show over the last 3 seasons and last 2 years because I am in a position where I can do that. And so now I'm in a world where I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I know I'm going to be here. I know I'm going to be hanging out with you. I know we're going to be talking about movies. I'm really fucking sad. I'm really going to miss the show. And it was a really special thing that was created by some really special people. And I can't thank Mark and Christian enough for, taking a shot on you and I. I mean, look, dude, I was a fan who fell into helping behind the scenes, who fell into helping write the questions, who fell into taking over as head writer. Mm-hmm. And then when Christian asked, who should be the head writer for the FCL, because he didn't want me to do that. He didn't want me spread too thin. The only person I could think of was you, because you and I would talk, and I knew that you knew your shit, and I knew that you would be very good at it, and I knew you would have fun with it, and I knew that meant we could work together. And what people don't know is we fucking worked together on both leagues. Yeah. Like, I will never forget, like, literally just spending nights on calls where we were writing matches for both sides of the league and going through those motions together. And it was really remarkable. And I'm really sad. I'm really, really sad because I don't know what's next. And it's hard. I'm in a total state of flux where I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no job right now. I have no source of income, and I wouldn't do it any other way. That's the crazy thing, is I would never have done it any other way. Like, I loved what we did. I loved the time we had with it. I want to give you guys the best Spectacular possible going out. It's all I can do. It's all PLD and I can do, but I'm going to miss it. And I really want to thank everyone for, like, we'll probably do something, would be my guess down the line. Once it's over, we may do our own, like, farewell show that will be 2 mediocre white dudes just talking about it. That'll be my guess, because it's you and I, and we're going to need to have our own, like, say in it all, I guess. And I think that that's only fair that you and I sit down and talk one last time about everything looking back. But for now, I just want to say thank you guys for your support. I know that most of you found us because of it, and you know us because of it. And our lives are dramatically changed for the better because the show existed, and it's really, really unique and really, really special. And I'm really lucky. It was a hell of a ride, man.
I'll give my 2 cents. The funny thing is, I didn't think we were going to discuss that today. PJ,
I mean,
I love it.
I had to, man.
You're right.
We should have up top, and it's the truth is this is going out the weekend after the announcement, and we probably should have said something up top, but I really wanted to talk about the movie, and I don't want us to go out on like this is not like a somber note; it's a realistic note.
I'll throw my 2 cents in there. Yeah, I mean, we did know we got the call about 2.5 weeks ago or so. It was very tough keeping it to ourselves, but obviously
you have no idea how hard that was for all of us.
But it's part of the job. It's part of the gig. It's not our show. It's not our place to say what to make announcements or to let anybody know about things and whatever. It's up to them. But the Schmodown has been a big part of my life for the past 9 years. I've been here since season 1 watching.
Me too.
And much like PJ, I became more invested as we went along. Obviously, when Team Action came to play, that's when I really super got invested more than anything else. I actually had something to glob onto, and they became my favorite team. I started working with Ben and Drew on action industry stuff, and that was a great moment. I got to know them better. At the same time, I joined up with Called Action, who had started before me, which was an after show of the Schmodown. I worked with them for a bit. It was a great time. They're still my family. They're still on today. We don't do as much as we used to do, but we have a couple of good shows, and they're going to continue all the way to the end. They're going to keep following the Schmodown until the end and beyond. Before pivoting to do other content, I'm sure. But then because of that, I got to go to live events. And sure enough, I met PJ at a live event. And that was the beginning of our beautiful friendship. I worked with.
Dude. I mean, legitimately, I the first time we really met was New York, right?
New York, the first live event outside of LA. Yeah.
You and I were at the bar until way too late hanging out and talking. And I'll never forget that.
I remember actually the very moment I met you. I can remember in my head, and this maybe should be saved for our next show, but I don't know.
Fuck it. Well, we can go back to it.
I was obviously already working for Ben and Drew at that point. Ben had, I can throw Ben under the bus now. It's so much later on. Ben let it slip that he was a surprise guest at that show. That's where Ben, the boss Bateman, was born. He came back. The music was played, or whatever. So I was going down. I had also known Brandon Hanna, who would also work with the Action Industries boys at that point. And really, the funny thing people don't know about Action Industries, there was about 12 of us working on them at one point. But really, at the beginning, Brandon, me, and Richard Eric Jarvie, you can also find on PLD Projects, were the big 3 who were really heavily involved with working in the beginning. Brandon was going to be there because he was working behind the scenes of the Schmodown as well. And I talked to Ben. Ben said stay afterwards after everybody leaves, and I'll get to say hey, we'll get because we had never actually met in person. We'd only met online, and streaming stuff. So everybody's getting kicked out. I found Brandon. Ben had given the high sign saying, go head over there, and I want to talk to Brandon. And there was PJ wrapping up cables, I think, doing stuff for behind the scenes stuff, whatever it was.
Stuff that I do.
And PJ kind of came up to me. He was like, yeah, you got to go. You got to shoot the audience out. You're telling the audience because I was an audience member. Got it. We're trying to clear it out because that's what he was told to do or whatever. And Brandon goes, no, he's here. He's here. Ben had him stay after. And PJ quickly goes, oh, well, that's a different case then. What's up? It's a great moment.
That's the best. I pivot so hard in those moments where I have to go from being the bad guy to, oh, cool, you're part of us. Great, cool. Let's hang out.
Cool. Let's hang out. And that's what we hung out at the bar and got way too drunk. It was great. It was phenomenal.
That feels like a lifetime, brother.
It does. It really does. And I worked, obviously, at that point. I didn't get in part. I met Christian a few times. And then when Christian decided at one point, I remember I talked to Christian about, here's a funny behind the scenes thing I'll talk about. Christian, Call to Action did a thing called Last General Standing, which was basically a free-for-all.
I remember this.
Free-for-all. So Christian DM'd me about Last General Standing. We were talking about doing having a rival trivia league, that kind of thing, joking around a little bit.
How dare you?
I know, right? But during the conversation, we talked about a few things, and obviously he had been on Chill to Action a few times, which was our interview show, but on Call to Action. He really hyped up Call to Action a lot. I can give him all the props in the world because Call to Action would never become the 2-time award-winning podcast that it was without the support from Christian. Christian shouted us out spectacular. He really, really had a good hand in making sure that we got our name out there with the Schmodown audience. But he had this idea. We were talking about the Trivia League. He said he floated this idea in my head. He's like, how would you feel about helping out with perhaps the minor leagues of the Schmodown. And me was like, well, that sounds interesting. I'm absolutely interested. Tell me more. I can't tell you more yet, but I'll tell you when we get to that point. Oh, and Brad Gilmore's going to contact you about a new show coming up. I was like, oh, okay, sure. And sure enough, that was coming up next. And coming up next with Brad Gilmore and Jen Sturger. And that was the beginning of a nice little run we did. It was a short-lived show. Didn't last a whole lot long. And at the end, it was probably too close. Between they had backstage, they had rundown, they had coming up next.
There was a lot happening back then.
It was a little bit too much. We tried to do our own different thing, and I think we succeeded at some levels. It was a lot of fun because Brad and Jen have a great chemistry. I was supposed to be behind the scenes while RB3 was transitioning into leaving. He asked me basically to engineer it and produce it. And I was like, oh, that's how I joined up. And of course, after that, the next thing after that left, that's when the FCL came in. That's when he tapped me and he said that he wanted me to be the head writer of the FCL. And sure enough, I came to PJ. And behind the scenes, we can say this now, definitely, like PJ and I basically wrote, again, like PJ said, I wrote the Schmodown and PJ wrote the FCL. It was all part and parcel.
We were working on both of them together. It was just easier.
It just made things easier because PJ was going to check my work and I would check his work anyway. So we were like, well, why don't we just write these together anyway? So
what the funny thing is that, and I'll say this out loud too, eventually we'll have another show talking about all this, but now we're dedicating this part to it. But the funny thing is if Christian didn't love a question, he would call me and be like, what's going on over there? And I was like, I don't know, dude. Like the FCL questions. If I wasn't for like the first 2 weeks, I was not very involved. And then I kept getting phone calls and I was like, look, I'll go deal with it. And then I would come to you and I was like, look, I got another phone call. And it just became, why don't we just hop on call and work together?
Right. And it was about because like at the point I'll admittedly now say I had a hard time trying to find the ease of the questions he wanted, obviously, because we were about the show about to become more accessible to people who wanted people to be able to get gettable answers instead of being as hard as it was at the time. And the Schmodown was getting that, and the FCL was supposed to be a developmental league, which was even less so. His pitch man at one point was Dan Merle should never come down to the FCL and lose. So I was like, yeah, sure, I get that and everything else. But it took a couple of weeks of matches to really kind of get how accessible it was supposed to be. Eventually, I did get it. We got a nice little rhythm going with that. And obviously, we worked together in MTS. And we got less phone calls as time went on as we developed our own style. And then we kind of knew what he was looking for and found a way to make it work with what he was looking for, what the fans wanted, and what we wanted as well. It had a nice little... I think we found a sweet spot. I mean, we did. I want to say we did. So
I think so. I think both leagues. I think both leagues were the best that they ever could be because of you and I.
Yeah, we did. I'll say that hands down. That's not patting myself in the back, patting ourselves in the back a little bit, but I think it's true. But I do also want to thank you for helping me. I also want to thank Christian and Mark. Christian and Mark definitely gave me a shot, and they've been nothing but professional and helpful with me as far as that goes, as developing things go. Whenever Christian did call me to correct me on something about that he wanted done, he always was very decent about it. And I explained my side, and by the end of the conversation, we were good friends still, and everything else. And so it was great working together at that point too. But working together with everybody in the Schmodown has been wonderful. I mean, everybody. Ken Knapsack, awesome man to work with. Andrew Guy, awesome to work with. The person we were closest with as far as the questions go, of course.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, the fan base.
I'll never say a bad word about Andrew Guy, Ken Knapsack, Jen Sturger. None of them. I love all of them, man.
Absolutely. And then beyond what we said, let's go back to where we came from. We were both our fans before we began. We have great friendships from the fans throughout and the fans in general. For the most part, the fans were phenomenally supporting. And I loved getting to deal with them or interact with them on a timely basis. Live events, amazing. So the best times of my life, not gonna lie. It's a family. And the Schmodown right now is a family. And you have the competitors, the managers, everything else, the Kevin Smetches, the Kaisers who call me on a regular basis. I could list everybody and I'd be forgetting at least like half people. So
there's so many of you guys. There's so many people that I love so dearly. And it just feels weird.
And now it's just kind of gone. And that's what's the weird about it is now we're at a time where we don't even know yet because it's not over. It's not really over yet. I hope people realize that too. It's not over. People should stay watching throughout the end. We have some great matches.
I mean, look, we have a lot of great matches left that we wrote that a lot of people put their time and effort into. Mm-hmm. So please watch them.
And we're going to write the hell out of spectacular as soon as we know what the matches are. We're going to try to write the best spectacular we possibly could. And then beyond that, that's when we'll find out how close the family gets to stick together. Because that's everybody's worry, I think. And I think it's a valid worry. Like once this was such a central hub for everything we did, that once it goes away, officially goes away, all sorts of, like after spectacular is done, then we'll see how close we all really are. I'm hoping that we're as close as we think we are, and that this won't die quickly. I think the community is strong, that we'll find ways to, I think we'll be more splintered. We'll have a little more groups of people probably. But as long as we stick together as a whole, for the most part, I'll be satisfied. But I do love the Schmodown. I thank you all for sticking with us through that. And I thank Christian and Mark again for creating it and for allowing us to have our potential. Skybound for also helping us out as well. TL and that and Courtney have been great to work with. I love them all as well.
Yep. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about everyone. Just feels weird it's over.
It does feel weird it's over. We do have a little bit of a run left that we have to do. So I'm going to give my heart and soul to it. And hopefully it'll, I don't know. But the silver lining is we do get to do more stuff like this. And you never know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe something else will happen, that something will, who knows?
Listen to the podcast. Keep listening. Keep listening. Keep being here. Keep supporting us. That's it, man.
We love you guys all. We do love you guys all for everything you've done for us. One way, I should plug it out. Look at that nice little segue. One way you can join us, Patreon. Patreon.com/PLD Projects, where you'll know everything you'll need to know about us. We do have extra content we give and more ways you can hang out. Although we actually hang out together on a monthly basis. We're going to do some in-depth shows. We do two mediocre white idiots in a box. Blue box. We talk about Doctor Who. And you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go into it now. I think I talk about this podcast as a potential thing for our patrons later on. If you like Halloween, we're going to give you more Halloween content. We haven't solidified it yet. PJ was kind of all on board. Talking the Taking Shape 2 book about all those lost sequels. We're going to do bonus content where we give you bonus two mediocre white dudes on film. We go through those broken sequels that never happened. Talk about what they would be, what they could have been, whether we would have liked to have seen them developed, and that kind of thing. I think actually it could be some fun times going through with that. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I ordered it while we were sitting here, by the way. So
did you? I'm glad.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I also ordered the Slash of the Titans one. So,
These guys are great. These guys are great. You're going to really enjoy them. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'm freaking excited.
It's going to be good. And of course, also for the rest of the time, you can find me on Class Action, also on the podcast. We do great. PJ was on last week.
It was
a fun time with was it Prince of Persia versus John Carter. That was a great discussion you guys had. I loved it. It was fun.
I had the best time, man. It was really fun hanging out with those guys. And, in typical me fashion, I managed to derail a good portion of the show with tangential stuff. It all tied to what we were talking about, though. So, I mean, it was a lot of fun. John Carter got all the love in the end, which is all I could have asked for. I didn't expect the sweep, to be honest with you. But the sweep was had, and I feel good about it.
That's right. We'll have to have you back on at some point. PJ is, we don't want to ever, 3 is our sweet spot. That's why I would actually invite PJ to be on full time, but 3 is our sweet spot, I think. So PJ will definitely be on anytime we can get him on. I might have actually an idea to put you on a little more than that, but we'll have to find out. I'll just sink some deep thoughts into this. Having you involved and everything. Of course, I'll also throw out there my Queen podcast that I do on a weekly basis, taking a couple weeks off now for Crown Jewels, but we're going to get into season 2 where we talk about Queen 2. That's another great one. But I want to shout out my patrons first. They've reached this level of support.
Real quick. We didn't do something again.
We're going to get back there in a second. Danielle Ramirez, Brandon Buckingham, Brandy Parker, Jeff Alterman, John Latrina, Kelly W. Mwah. Love you guys so much. We'll hang out soon. Yes, there is one thing I didn't think about doing because, quite frankly, we already kind of spoiled it. But we will talk about it real quick. Our ratings of this film, our rankings of this franchise, because the rest of the films are going to matter as far as this goes. This one doesn't matter as much because we know right away what we're going to do. This is an 11 out of 11. We always go from 0 to 11 on PLD Project because you guys turn up to 11. This is a perfect film, for a horror film. I can't see anybody giving it less than 11. If you do, I don't want to know you. So PJ, tell
No,
me.
it's straight up an 11. I mean, look, it's really like a 12 or a 13 or a 14.
Really?
Like there's nothing like it, man. Like again, I adore this movie. I genuinely think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. It doesn't get better than this. And spoiler alert, it's going to be our number one in the franchise ranking. It's not even a competition. So yeah, this is a straight fire 11.
Exactly. So when you'll see the rest of the rankings, it's all going to be about who comes in number 2. That's what's really going to happen at this point. But other than that, that's it, my friends. I'm at Paul _ Newsy on Twitter. Where the folks find you, PJ?
Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell, here hanging out, talking about all things movies with you. Just having a good time for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be talking Halloween. So, strap in. It's not going to, you think this one's long, just wait. I'm sure there's going to be longer ones down the line. We got fun stuff to look forward to.
Right.
Thanks again for the support, guys.
Thanks you very much for the support. We love you. Halloween 2 next week, folks. And then maybe The Fog. But we'll find out.
Yes.
We'll find out. Until next time, keep staying mediocre, guys. Stay as mediocre as possible.
Love you all.
Take care.